There we go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Movie Discussion Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist, and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Jay, joined as always by Cole, and today we're going to be discussing Le Samouraï, the 1967 neo-noir French film that we have wanted to do on this show since pretty much the beginning. Yeah. But this was my first time watch, and really looking forward to talking about it, man.
Yeah, way back when we were coming up with just the idea of this show, like the very first time we sort of threw together a list of films we thought would be cool to talk about. This was on there. I guess I brought it up because we were trying to talk about films that we considered sort of influential. And this has always been a really influential film, particularly in the genre of crime drama or noir or whatever you want to say. It has its fingerprints in so many movies going forward that we'll talk about. So yeah, a long time in coming. And I mean, in that time, we've done a fair amount of French films, but I guess now the time felt right. We did Breathless. The original plan for this was, we were going to try to do the whole compare and contrast to the remake thing. We could not find the remake, the 1983 American remake of Breathless streaming anywhere, and there just wasn't any time to procure a physical copy of it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, maybe someday we can find that and just do a standalone episode on it, because it just feels like something unfinished, and I kind of want to watch it. But we still have the Samouraï in our back pocket, not just as a filler, but if we did Breathless, we still would have been doing this movie next anyway.
Yeah. And the plan is to do Driver next week, right? Yeah,
that's right, the Driver. Driver. Yeah, so years back we did Drive, the popular 2011 movie with Ryan Gosling, and I know in that we talked about sort of tracing its genesis back. And yeah, it really starts with this movie, Le Samouraï, but also the Driver in '78, where you basically you start in this movie with the story of a lone assassin carrying out a job and getting involved with a witness, and then basically about 10 years later in the '70s, Walter Hill, we talked about a little last show because I really like him, took sort of that concept but tweaked it a little bit by changing from an assassin to a getaway driver, but following a very similar sort of structure and sort of using the same sort of style. And then, once again, decades later, Drive doing the same thing, once again with a getaway driver, but also throwing some other new elements into it. So, yeah. And this movie itself, Le Samouraï, is technically kind of a loose remake of a noir film from the 40s called This Gun for Hire, which I've never seen. So, I mean, apparently this is quite loose. It's not as connected, but technically, at least the concept is based on that concept. So yeah, you can really trace. You can trace sort of this one sort of core concept across decades, a lifetime, and manifesting in different movies. But really, yeah, I think of Le Samouraï, Driver, and Drive as almost sort of kind of like an unofficial sort of trilogy in its way. But what would you call it? We talk about how there's there's a traditional trilogy where just the same stories being followed, new chapters in a story, and then of course thematic trilogies, which we finally got to do a bit when we did our 100th episode special, when we did the thematic what was it, the Apocalypse trilogy, by John Carpenter, and we also touched on some of the other ones. But this is, I don't even know if this exists. It's more of an unofficial thing, but it's almost kind of like a stylistic trilogy, you might say, something like that. I don't know if any of you even use those terms, but it's kind of how I think of those movies. So it's interesting that the way we're doing them is we did the latest one first, and this is the oldest one, and we're going to do the middle one right after that. Well, we're doing some jumping around. But yeah, Le Samouraï, 1967. So last week we did a film that was really prominent in the French New Wave, Breathless, and we talked a lot about that movement. This film is, only a few years later, and of course it's French, but it's coming from a very different place. You wouldn't really consider it French New Wave, although it, of course, has some of those stylistic elements in it. This is almost more like it's almost more like the movement that was inspired. It's almost like a new Hollywood movie, just except it's French, and not that, because it just, I don't know, it has kind of that vibe. It reminds you a lot of some of those movies from the same time. And in '67, just when New Hollywood was just kicking off. And I think I think sort of spiritually and stylistically, and just sort of the way it feels a lot like a lot of those American new Hollywood movies that were coming out at the time. I think I read a quote somewhere that said something like, "This almost feels like, it was an American movie that was dubbed into French." I read that somewhere.
Yeah, I can feel that. I can totally understand that. But before we get too deep in it here, I wanted to see what exactly defines neo-noir, because I mean there's films that come out now that are considered neo-noir. Like what's the cutoff there?
I was thinking about that too, because it's weird that noir is one of those like genres. People can always get picky about how you define whether a movie fits. Noir is one of the most picky, because it's kind of like, how sometimes people talk about like punk music, and they'll say like anything that's come out in like the last 30 years isn't punk, right? They'll be like, punk existed from like 1977 to like 1988 or something, and everything after that is like post-punk or pop-punk, or that was true punk. I mean, you can agree with that, disagree with that, but that is a prevailing opinion a lot of people have. It's the same thing with film noir, and I know we talked about this because we actually did the film, in that I guess film noir had its beginnings in the 30s, had its real heyday in the 40s, but went throughout the 50s. But anyway, if you're talking to like one of those people that holds this opinion, a film we did in our Orson Welles series was Touch of Evil. Mm-hmm. And those purists consider Touch of Evil, which came out in 1958, a decade before this film, the last true noir. So they feel like anything that has noir elements following 1958 basically is neo-noir. I don't know if you want to disagree with that or not. I mean, I don't mind it, I guess. I'm trying to understand, what makes the real difference. Like, that seems to suggest that, like, whatever would have been like noir after 1958. I want to know, like, what characterizes those movies that people think, well, it's like noir, but you can't really call it noir. This is neo-noir. I don't know. But yeah, neo-noir itself exists right up to now. Like, that's how you classify anything that came out now that had those elements, like Drive itself. Drive is considered neo-noir. That's from 10 years ago. But I really don't know, beyond just it being a timing thing, like if anybody wants to fill me in, what the key difference between noir and neo-noir is really, except that maybe it just is an era thing. Maybe the idea is like noir only exists in like sort of like 3-decade window. I'm not really sure why, but yeah. But as far as I can tell, the only difference really between neo-noir and noir is when it came out. That seems to be it.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I figured, because they all use the same, stylized elements.
Yeah, I mean, I think also because a big part of noir was being black and white, maybe.
Yeah, this Touch of Evil was black and white, right?
Right.
That makes
sense. Almost like, noir can't be in color. It's funny, like this movie, the writer and director Jean-Pierre Melville even said something like he set out to make a black and white movie in color. And I think he really succeeded, because the movie uses a lot of gray and blue. There's a lot of that gives it this sort of like dismal look that reminds you of noir, and yet there's still color. So it is a really good look.
It is
sort of washed out. It's a really good look.
It's a really interesting look. It makes his eyes pop, Jeff's eyes pop. His blue eyes against the basically gray canvas around him.
Right. And something they did really, and I'm sure we talked about this in a few years, I don't remember, but like something that's interesting about Drive is Drive sort of takes that concept of those like washout colors, but having like, juxtaposing them against sort of like some neon. There's quite a bit of like neon, bright light colors in that, which is really interesting.
That is, yeah.
Which you can even trace that back, because you see a bit of that in something that's not technically noir, but sort of like is like Blade Runner, right? Like Blade Runner almost invented cyberpunk, which is basically sort of a sci-fi world shot through like a noir lens. And so, yeah, I'd say like the look you see in Drive, some of it is kind of reminiscent of something like Blade Runner, and that it's sort of like a dismal, washed out world. But then at the same time, there are like bright neon signs and, and popping colors here and there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a great contrast.
It's really, it looks really good visually.
When I first got into neo-noir films, I watched Romeo is Bleeding from '93. That's when I first knew the term.
Yeah, right.
And started actually paying attention to it. Have you ever seen that one?
No, I haven't. I know the title. Who's in that, or anybody I know, or
yeah, Gary Oldman, Juliette Lewis, Lena Olin.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when I first became aware of the term. The thing about neo-noir and noir is like it can be pretty flexible. I remember there's a film from like 2005 or 2006 or something like that called The Ice Harvest that would be considered neo-noir. That I don't know if you ever saw it. You probably like it if you saw it. It's
I believe I've seen it. As I get that and the Ice Storm mixed up.
Yeah, I know.
By the title.
Exactly, me too. But of course, once again, I'm gonna go completely numb and blank.
No, you've recommended this to me. I have not seen it.
Yeah, I think is Randy Quaid the bad guy? I think Randy Quaid is like a small-time crime lord, and
Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, I think he's in there. But the main guy isn't it John Cusack? John Cusack. Yeah, it's been some years. But anyway, that's a neo-noir movie. I haven't seen it in a long time. But I remember that was one of the first times I really thought about the term was back when I saw that movie, probably around 2006 or 2007. I'm sure I'd heard the term before, but again, this is when I'm, going from more of a casual movie viewer into sort of the more critical person that I became over time. So it's I mean, it is weird trying to make the distinction sometimes, because sometimes you'd be like, well, is any sort of like modern crime thriller, is that neo-noir? Yeah. I would say no, not always.
I agree.
But it is hard to make that distinction because, once again, thinking about Billy Bob Thornton, a really great thriller is a perfect or a Simple Plan, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great one.
But I don't really think of A Simple Plan as neo-noir. I think because of its setting. The setting is rural, and I think that maybe keeps it from being.
You don't really see a lot of like Dutch angles and stuff in there, though, do you?
No. I kind of feel like one of the rules for noir or neo-noir is maybe kind of a mostly urban setting. Although the one I just mentioned, The Ice Harvest, kind of isn't. I mean, it's urban, but it's kind of like small town. It's like small town Kansas or some bullshit like that. It's not like a cool hip city like Chicago or Paris or New York or LA, where a lot of these noirs take place. But I guess I do think if like an urban setting has to be part of it. I think you need city streets, you need nightclubs.
I've got a list here, which I think is pretty. I don't know how accurate this list is on Wikipedia, but some of the ones we've covered here, like Bad Lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably would qualify, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's more like one of those sort of like dirty, gritty ones. Less stylized and just more about more about being harsh and gritty.
Here's one I watched last night, actually, Batman Returns.
I would say Batman Returns has those elements, but you can't really call it through because it is a superhero movie. But I mean, it does have some of those elements.
I would say, man, it's been a while since I've seen that movie, and that's an amazing movie. I really feel like Tim Burton really got a bad shake on that. Yeah, it's so dark. I love it.
Yeah, I know that like really upset like the people that wanted to like sell toys and stuff. Like we need this for like Happy Meal toys. What are you doing?
Yeah, we got this fat penguin, this disgusting thing.
Yeah, biting people's noses off.
Yeah, he bites noses off.
Yeah.
Man, I love it.
My relationship with the Burton Batmans is complicated, but I don't dislike them. There's things I like about them, and I can appreciate. Like I said, I always have to think of it like as Tim Burton's Batman. It's like not Batman. It's just some sort of like weird sort of interpretation of Batman that's kind of off to the side that I don't hate. It's okay.
Yeah,
there is a lot to enjoy in both those movies.
I mean, I think
Chinatown is probably the most famous neo-noir I think there is.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Canceled. It's canceled.
Jack Nicholson. I haven't seen that in a long time either.
I haven't either. I don't really care for it, honestly.
Yeah, I need to rewatch it, but no, it's not one I'd ever really want to do for the show. But yeah, I think it's a bit overrated. They made a sequel to it that I never saw.
Really?
It's called Chinatown 2. It's called like the 2 Jakes or the 3 Jakes or something like that.
Oh, I think I may have heard of that actually.
Yeah. I'd like to watch both because I barely remember Chinatown. And I like to say, but yeah, I think Chinatown was really, that's like 74. I don't know if the term even really existed when this movie came out in like the late 60s. I'm not really sure. when the term. I think Chinatown is really the movie that like popularized the idea of neo-noir. And what's weird about Chinatown is like it came out in 1974, but it's set during the era of noir, right? Like it's set in like the 40s or early 50s or something like that. So why is that neo-noir? And again, it's only because of when it came out. Because I was thinking, because visually, because of what its setting is, it looks just like noirs from back in the day, except that it is in color, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really think Chinatown is the movie that popularized the term.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I believe so.
I always think also, if you think of Touch of Evil as the last true noir, it's pretty different too, in that it doesn't really have that urban setting, right? Like it's set at like on a border town between Mexico and the U.S., and it's just little towns. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be super urban, I guess. But still, there is a difference between that and like, I don't know, out a cabin in the woods or up in the mountains or out in the desert or, things like that. It's like, there's no such thing as a jungle noir or a mountain noir. Noirs don't happen out on the ocean, I don't think. Although maybe part of a noir could.
I feel like people try that though, like Fargo or something like that was probably going for that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people characterize Fargo as a neo-noir. Again, it's sort of a different one because it's more rural than urban, right? But I think most people would accept Fargo as a neo-noir. In fact, I'm pretty sure that would make most lists. A lot of people say it's one of the best ones. Yeah,
I can imagine people that are. I mean, there's big communities like on Twitter and stuff that all about noir films, and I can imagine there's lots of arguments on what films qualify and what films don't.
Right, and that is interesting to me because these are some of my favorite movies that cross these things, whether it's noir or neo-noir or something that even spun off from it, like. LA Confidential is one of my favorite movies. I just love that movie. I love that movie to death. And I know I've said this before, but since somebody did bring it up, like I think that's one of those movies that was like huge when it came out and it's completely faded from people's memories. Like nobody seems to talk about it anymore. It never seems to like get brought up or put on lists or anything like that. It was such a big deal at the time. Like if some actors won some best, a huge cast. Some people won best actors for it. Kim Basinger again. There she is from Batman. She won Best Supporting Actress, which I think she was probably the least deserving actor in that movie of getting an award. But again, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Just saying. That's really the movie. I mean, I love Guy Pearce. That put Guy Pearce kind of on the map.
I don't know. I still see that on some list. Didn't you see it on like the best
shootouts? There's a list. I was looking up gunfights and shootouts, and it made there. There wasn't a very well written list because it said it took place in the streets of 1920s LA. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It takes place in the fucking 50s, you idiots. Like nobody's talking about people like Lana Turner or whatever in the 20s. Yes, that famously that, but. Yeah, I really feel like that movie's kind of faded, but I love that movie. I've got that on DVD. I don't watch it all the time, but I watch it. I really like it. It's so fun. For the millionth time, I keep putting off. I don't know why I haven't watched season 3 because I liked season 1 and 2.
Oh, season 3.
I really liked 2. I thought season 1 was fine. I thought season 2 was really good, and everyone says season 3 is really good too. I'm going to do it, but yeah. So yeah, whether it's pure noir or neo noir or something spun off, like, these are a lot of my favorite movies. Like here's Leon the Professional, which shares a lot from this movie because it's kind of an assassin movie too, because I really like assassin movies. And this would be a template for just assassin movies in general too. Here's The Killer by John Woo, which follows a very similar plot, right down to like the witness being a performer at a nightclub. In this, it's a piano player, but in The Killer, it's a singer.
Yeah, this is apparently John Woo's favorite movie.
Makes perfect sense to me, yeah.
So he's obviously a big fan of the noir.
I love assassin movies. The Killer's probably my very favorite assassin movie, but it owes obviously a great debt to this movie just as far as that goes. And quite a few Asian directors love this movie and take from it because you've also got, besides John Woo, you got Johnny To and Ringo Lam, director I've championed on here a few times. He's not great, but he has a style I really like. He's made a handful of movies I really dig. And yeah, you can see that influence. I think he did make speaking of Chow Yun-fat, isn't Ringo Lam the one who did The Replacement Killers? Which is another assassin movie.
Could be right. I'm not sure.
I'm just gonna look that up now just to be sure.
I was gonna say something. I forgot what it was.
No, it's not directed by Ringo Lam. I was thinking of somebody else. It was actually directed by somebody I've never heard of called Antoine Fuqua. Fuqua. But I always thought Replacement Killers is kind of like a poor man's kind of like John Woo imitation movie. I own it on like one of those like crappy like double sets with some other crappy movie. But I guess I thought of John Woo because it is Chow Yun-Fat once again playing Hitman. It's not nearly as good. It's not anywhere on the level of something like The Killer. It's not.
Is that Mark Wahlberg?
I like it.
Is Wahlberg in that?
No. It's Chow Yun-Fat and Mira Sorvino.
Okay.
You know, it's one of those. I think for a lot of people, it was a fairly forgettable action movie from the late '90s, and that's fair. I've just always had a thing for it, and it's not just because of Chow Yun-Fat. But anyway, for some reason. But yeah, so I guess that reminds me a bit of Ringo Lam. But yeah, now I need to think of a Ringo Lam movie. It's funny. The one I always think of, I guess, when I think of Ringo Lam right off, is sort of one of those from the same era, kind of forgotten. Full Contact. Thank you, Sean. That is what I was thinking of. But the Ringo Lam one, I guess I think of as the Jean-Claude Van Damme one. Maximum Risk.
Okay.
Which again is another late '90s, somewhat forgettable action movie from that period. But I just kind of like anyway. I like that movie. There's nothing really special about it. But yeah. Ringo Lam's an interesting guy. Maybe sometime we can do a movie or two of his on there. I realize they'd be a little hard to talk about because they're not particularly deep or anything. They're usually fairly straightforward, but I don't know. There might be something there. Of course, the one I'd love to do is City on Fire, but I can't fucking find it anywhere. Because I want to do City on Fire and just because I really famously strongly dislike the film Reservoir Dogs. I've always really disliked that movie. Yeah. And I don't like that Reservoir Dogs borrows so heavily from City on Fire, which I think is so superior. Yeah, Ringo Lam, we talked about it before. He loves the on fire thing. Like the last movie he did was called Sky on Fire. It came out in 2016. And he used on fire a few times. Right. He did the Twin Dragons movie, the Jackie Chan movie, where Jackie Chan plays the twin brothers. So anyway, he's had an interesting career, Ringo Lam. I mean, he's kind of a one-note guy, just sort of act, but I like his stuff. I wish I could see. I wish more of his stuff was readily available over here, but it's hard. And of course, he did the classic. Or no, he didn't direct it, did he? No, okay. I was gonna say he's just a producer. I was gonna say, did he direct Simon Says? No, he did not.
The film I was thinking of was the Corruptor with Wahlberg and Chow Yun-Fat. It was right around the same time that he was doing American movies.
Chow Yun-Fat is so prolific. There's so much stuff. Like I've seen a lot of his movies, and I still haven't seen like maybe a third of them. He's done so much. Chow Yun-Fat is awesome. And I know we talked here before, but like how surprisingly rich he is. Like he's like 10 times richer than like the average Hollywood star. And apparently like he doesn't spend money on anything. And I guess in the last few years he's been just giving his money away to charities. I haven't really followed up on that, but like he's like known for like taking the subway, and so like he doesn't own like a flashy car or anything. He's just one of those guys that lives really frugally, and he just has his fortune was like estimated like over 800 million US, which is bonkers. Like somebody like Brad Pitt might have half that. Anyway, I don't want to go off a tangent here and get. Oh, okay, yeah. I was trying to think of the other. Yeah, so he did a handful of. Besides Maximum Risk, Ringo Lam did In Hell and Replicant. Those all being Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. Replicant's quite bad, but In Hell has its moments. I think I own those on DVD too because they're easy and cheap to pick up.
Yeah. I think I've seen both of those actually, but it was in that odd period of time when Van Damme was like, not a big time actor anymore, but he was still making, halfway decent movies.
But he was still there, yeah. But yeah, we're both big fans of Van Damme. But anyway, yeah. So Ringo Lam being the other guy I was trying to think of. So yeah, you've got Johnny To, John Woo, and Ringo Lam, all big fans of this movie, Le Samouraï. As we said, its influence can be felt like all the way up to the present day as far as movies. So getting to this movie, it's kind of a bare bones plot, and executed very slowly and very deliberately, which may try some people's attention. Doesn't bother me. I feel like it builds atmosphere. But I can understand maybe some people be a little impatient with it and say like some scenes are drawn out and they could be shorter. I get that argument. I wouldn't disagree with that entirely. I'm just saying it doesn't bother me because I feel like the movie is building a sort of amount of tension. an atmosphere.
I mean, I hadn't seen this film before, but I kind of figured out what was going to happen at the end. So I was like, just waiting for it. I was like, come on, let's get to it. We were watching the cops, go through their process, they're placing bugs and,
right,
just doing their thing. And I was like, come on, get on with it,
Yeah. So another thing that this shares in common with the other two movies we talked about, not just Structured Life, like The Driver and Drive, is we have a protagonist that talks very little. He only sort of talks when it's absolutely necessary. And this movie has several stretches where there isn't any dialogue at all. The first 11 minutes of this movie has no dialogue.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there is that whole thing where they're bugging the apartment, where, once again, these are the cops, and they don't talk either. And I know some people could find a scene like that slow and annoying, but I think viewed through the lens of a modern audience, it's just interesting because you just see how different the technology was back then. Like nowadays, I think bugging an apartment would be a lot quicker and simpler. Whereas, like, it's pretty difficult. And at one point, they have like a really big thing with like a red light on it, and he's like, "Oh, maybe that's a bit much," and he replaces it with something smaller. It's like, you think he's not going to notice something that looks like a fucking walkie-talkie sitting, hanging from his curtain or whatever. But it's sort of a long, drawn-out process. But I just kind of enjoy it, as somebody in 2021, looking back at what the technology was like all those years ago. It was, bugging was a fairly new thing at the time. I think they, it was during World War II. I think that sort of technology was being worked out. So it had been around for a little while, but still it hadn't advanced that much. But that's another scene without any dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the main characters don't really have a lot of dialogue. It's mainly the cops that are doing all the talking.
Right. And then, like I said, that would be carried over to the other movies. To the point where even in Drive, it annoys me a little bit because it feels forced. Because sometimes people are like talking directly to him and then he just doesn't answer, or he pauses for like 20 seconds before saying something. I'm like, at least I feel like they've maybe carried it too far in that. Because in this movie, we have a character that is very, he's very silent and only speaks when necessary. But he doesn't do that. If somebody speaks to him, he speaks back to them. He doesn't leave massive pauses or anything. Yeah, I mean, he has a pause here and there. But anyway, I think maybe that got carried a little too far in Drive. But I don't mind too much. What's funny is when I was looking at my movies, I thought I owned Drive, but I guess I don't. I thought I did, but I couldn't find it.
I don't think I own it either. I've seen it like 10 times, but I don't think I own it.
I remember seeing like one of the not from this series, but like a nice steelbook of Drive, and I don't know why I wouldn't have bought it because I really like steelbooks. I own a bunch of them. I had gone a long time without buying any movies, and I recently bought one just a little while ago.
There used to be a website called Film Aficionado that I had my whole collection on, and I could go and look and see, do I own it? Because I don't want to buy it again.
Yeah. Well, see, unlike you, I can mostly keep track of what I own. I have a large collection, but not, on the same level as a lot of people, or, people that I know on YouTube, like Pizzelle or whoever, they've just got like walls of it.
Yeah.
I agree with that, Jake. I'm sure we'll talk about that because if you weren't around at the start of this, we're going to follow up this show with The Driver next week. So tune in for that if you can.
And I had seen, obviously I'd seen Drive and I'd seen The Driver, but I'd never seen this film. So that's what I was kind of like, come on, let's get it going. I know the pacing is slow, intentional, but I was just ready to get it,
right,
get on with the action.
So, I mean, back to when this movie came out, it was kind of more of a deconstruction. It was kind of a deconstruction of some of the crime tropes that were out there. In that, we'd sort of run the gamut from like sort of glamorized crime to some of that crime doesn't pay type crime they had under the Hays Code. This is kind of more, it's kind of like a blending between the two, in that it's unrealistic and that it sort of has like an element of coolness that doesn't really exist in the real world. Like, he's just sort of cool in everything he does. But there's also realism in it, in like the shape the movie's plot takes, is particularly the ending. He's living this life and it's all going to end badly. Like, he can't sustain it. And it just comes down to a guy deciding to go out on his own terms. So another thing that made it interesting was, what was I going to say? Another thing that made it interesting. Shit, I can't believe I lost my train of thought during the sentence. That's got to be a new record for me. Oh, it's just the fact that like nowadays we see a lot of like sort of the existentialist like hero or protagonist. Like that was pretty rare back then. I think this is one of the more early examples, or at least one of the more early examples that was sort of like prominent. And I mean, what's cool is like he doesn't talk about it and he doesn't say anything. It's just and that's what's in the title. I mean, it's called the Samurai, right? The idea of this guy that lives his life by a code. Mm-hmm. Now, we all, if you know anything about samurais and somebody obsessed with that kind of stuff like me knows, it's not a great parallel because, samurais weren't assassins, for instance. But they're not saying that. They're just saying, they're talking about living by code. And it starts with, the movie starts with a quote from supposedly the Book of Bushido, but that's just made up nonsense. That's just something that the director, that's just something Melville came up with as on his own. Because I don't even know if there is such a thing as Book of Bushido. I'm sure there's books about it, but probably any ones wouldn't actually mention tigers. Japanese people knew what tigers were, but tigers didn't exist in Japan. But it mentions about a tiger in the jungle. I'm like, there's no jungles or tigers in Japan. I mean, they would have heard of it from the Chinese. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, so that quote is bullshit. It's just made up for the movie, which is fine. But yeah, it is really about the idea of him living by a code, and you'll see that again and again too. For some history on our show, the very first movie we did for this show was No Country for Old Men, and that features a killer that lives by a very sort of strict code, right? I don't like it, but a lot of people really like it. But it's another example of a killer that has sort of his own way, because it's not just about taking money and killing people. There's also some sort of like self-imposed rules in there too that we get to see, and that's why the movie ends the way it does, which we'll get to. But it starts off very cut and dry. He's obviously been contracted to take somebody out, and then he goes about it we see that he's really cautious in his approach. He does the whole thing of, first of all, if you're going to drive somewhere to kill somebody, you don't drive your own car. He steals a car, and then to be sure about the car not being traced, he's got a contact that will replace the plates for him. And then he's got a girlfriend that he uses to establish alibis for, which is sort of a big part of the plot in the first half of the movie. And at first, it's a little confusing that you find out, like, even though that's like his girlfriend. In fact, they use the word in French. They say fiancé instead of girlfriend. But anyway, she does see other men. And remember, he's talking about like when he's saying like, I was here between these hours and hours, this hour and that hour. And she's like, that won't work because I'm going to see this guy at this time. So he adjusts to that. And then you find out much later on that it's kind of an interesting gambit he makes that pays off. Because when he's counting on being hauled in, I'm not really sure why, but he does get hauled in with a whole bunch of other people that, they bring all these people that might fit I guess because he knew that like he couldn't do anything about like witnesses seeing him. Like at some point, witnesses are going to see him, and after he carries out the hit at the club, we as the audience are shown several people at the club that definitely notice him. So the whole thing is, the cops do their thing where they pull in all these guys that at least vaguely meet that description, and of course he's one of them. But they have this whole thing where he makes sure that one of the guys that gets called in is the man that his girlfriend was going to meet. But he doesn't get called in for that. He gets called in because he saw him later they didn't actually see each other. It's hard to remember, but the whole point is the boyfriend thinks like, oh, this is the guy that I saw leaving, the girl's apartment that I like. I can screw him over here by fingering him. But by doing that, in fact, he's providing the alibi for him is what's going on. So I got a little muddled there, but that's what's happening. And that's why it's kind of clever. Because I'm pretty sure the guy who says, oh, I'm not very observant, but then suddenly he becomes very observant and says, oh, like even when they switch the clothes around, right? They do the whole thing where they make them wear different hats and coats. He's like, it would have been that hat and that coat with that face, which is exactly right. But all that does is corroborate, his alibi. That, oh, he couldn't have been at the club at this time if he saw him leaving at that time. So it's quite smartly done. And one of the reasons why the main reason why the cops can't hold him at first, because even though they don't have anything on him, the cops, or at least one of the cops, gets a real feel like this is our guy. I don't care what the evidence says. Like, this is the guy. It's interesting, too, because when he first gets pulled in, the cop says to him, it's just a background check. If you make an honest living, you'll get let go. So when they call a few people up, they mention some stuff. And one of the guys before him actually has a pretty long rap sheet of, previous convictions on stuff. But they know it's not him. They let him go. When they call him up, they note that he has no criminal record. He's clean. But they don't say anything about his employment. which I thought was weird because, like, if he doesn't have a job, wouldn't that be suspicious? It's like, well, if he doesn't have any job that we can find, maybe he is our contract killer. Mm-hmm. But that's not followed up on or mentioned. So,
and they were like, I think he had a mustache. And they were like, why did you shave off your mustache?
Yeah. I mean, I get that too because they talk about just sort of how unreliable eyewitness testimony can be. You know, sometimes we put too much stock in it when you realize that, like, yeah, all these people got a good look at him, and yet none of them can really agree if they saw him or not. Like, one person's like, definitely yes, definitely no. It looks like him, but he had a different hat. Oh, I think he had a mustache, which is pretty accurate. That kind of thing happens all the time. One of the reasons why, like, when you're doing like a court case, eyewitness testimony is not as damning as it sounds because people don't remember things the right way or the same. And I'm certainly like that. I'm terrible with faces, man. I don't remember people. I don't remember people I meet, let alone like people that I just see somewhere. I
don't commit it to memory is the thing. I don't consciously commit it to memory. So
yeah, because sometimes when you're watching something like a movie like this, in the context of it, you even get frustrated. It's like, well, we saw them look right at him, but at the same time, put yourself in that position. You're at a club. You don't know anything's happened. It'd be different if, you heard shots and screaming, and then this guy came, but that's not what happened. You didn't know anything had happened. You just sort of saw a guy. And you found out after the fact. Because that'd be like, just living your life at all times, looking around and, taking everything into detail because maybe there was a crime that we didn't know about. Nobody lives like that, right? So yeah, sometimes, I think as audiences we can get like annoyed. But if you really step back and think about it realistically and logically, well, no, like 90% of people are, they're not going to take that in because why would they? And for most people, like myself, like, why would you? I think of myself as observant in some ways, but in other ways, like, I kind of go out of my way to ignore people. So,
right.
So yeah, I would make a terrible eyewitness if like I was around a crime and I got called in. I'd be like, it was a person, bipedal, had a head. That'd probably be the best I could do.
I mean, that's the funny thing about memory is it often betrays us. Like, there's things that I remember, from my childhood that I'm like, I know it happened this way, but then I'll go find a photograph or something and it'll be different,
Yeah, exactly.
Like something that actually proves that my memory is wrong.
Yeah.
So it's fucked up.
Yeah, and it's not played up in this movie, but I've talked about it again and again. The movies that we do that, talk about flashbacks and memories. That's one of my favorite themes in like fiction. I really like stuff that deals with memory. I think a lot of it goes back to the Tennessee Williams play, The Glass Menagerie, which is all basically a flashback. And it's told at the beginning when Tom speaks to the audience, he says, like, this is a memory play. I always sort of liked that idea. And I like stories that kind of have that motif that it's like, instead of the story happening in sort of real time, it's more like this story happened at some point in the past and now it's being recollected and now it's being remembered by this party or sometimes even multiple parties, which makes it interesting too, because then sometimes you'll get conflicting things, right? Like somebody remembers something one way, somebody else remembers it another. This movie's not all about that, but it is true that it makes that point about like how eyewitness testimony is not nearly as reliable as it sounds like it should be.
Right.
But I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's one of those movies that also I like too for its sparseness and like we don't know how he got. Like I like that we don't know his backstory. Like we don't know how he got into this line of work. We don't know how he met the people that contracted him for this hit. We don't know why they wanted this guy killed. And I mean, I like that none of that is told. I think that's it's better for the story to. Keep
doesn't really matter either.
Exactly, really. Like that's not really what it's about. It's about. It just seems like nowadays, especially when you have like an interesting character, especially like a villain, like everybody wants like some sort of origin story. It's like not everything needs a fucking origin story.
I know. That's the way everything is now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, some of my favorite movies, the best thing about it is like being deliberately ambiguous or just deliberately not filling in details. I'm sure I've talked about this before in past episodes. Speaking of a thriller I really like is the thriller The Hitcher, right? I love that in The Hitcher, we have no idea who this guy is or what his motivation is or where he came from. Like, and it's just all left up to the imagination. Like, I feel like nowadays, like if The Hitcher had come out, let's say The Hitcher, which actually didn't make a big deal in the 80s, but let's say, a movie like The Hitcher comes out now and everybody really likes it. They'd be like, all right, we got to work on a prequel. We got to find out who this guy was. Like, fuck off. No, we don't. Leave some mystery in it. I mean, I've harped on this, but it's one of the things that's really terrible to me about the Halloween remake. I mean, I think everything with the Halloween remake is bad. We're not going to go into that rabbit hole, but I just mean in really general terms, I hate the idea of them like demystifying Michael Myers, of them like, oh, here's the reasons for this, here's the reasons for that, here's why this happened. I think that's all bullshit. Some people like it, and that's fine, but it really goes against the kind of things that interest me in most movies and stories. Like, I mean, it's all well and good to find out things about characters. I'm just saying certain characters in certain stories, it's much better to just leave it vague, leave it to the imagination. And it's definitely what we want with this character. It's actually what's interesting, I think, about the driver, and we'll talk about it again, I'm sure, is I think that Walter Hill, in making the driver, saw that aspect of this movie and realized he could take it a step further. Because in this movie, we know at least our character's name. In the driver, none of the characters have names. That's why it's like called the driver. Like the main character is the driver, and that's all we know. This movie, we actually know his name is Jeff Costello, and other characters get named. Something that's cool about the driver is the main character's not named. Nobody's named. You watch the credits, and it's the this, the that, or whatever. And we'll talk about it again next week when we get to it. Totally agree, Jacob. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I also infamously joke. I hate it. I loathe it, and that's another reason why. But anyway.
It's something about just being dropped into the action versus, okay, this guy's upset, he's mad because of this, and it's not necessary sometimes.
Yeah, I don't need to know that this guy like had a rough childhood and
you can assume that much already.
Or he got kicked out of the army and now he's using his skills to like be a killer. Like none of that matters, man. Just drop us into it. This guy's like a cold, sort of passionless, really. He's calm to the point of like it's nuts how calm he is. What's fun, which does make some of the moments more poignant, because remember, in the third act, there's that whole part where he's actually trying to shake the tail, and the cops have set up that drag net for him, but he just manages to get out of the way. Remember, he's trying to steal a car, and he's got like his big ring of keys to steal the car, and it's the first time you actually see an expression of concern on his face, which I think makes it all the more impactful. That finally something does have him a little worried, something does have him a little rattled, because at this point he's realized that like kind of no matter what he does, he's either going to get killed or arrested. Like there's not really any way out. And that's why it's so important to sort of go out on his own terms. But yeah, to that point, we never see him panic. We never see him react at all. So it's kind of more impactful and poignant when finally we do see, he is a little upset. He's a little worried here. He's stressed out trying to find the right key so he can get away. And I mean, nowadays, again, there's just been so many movies with assassins and assassinations, and it gets so stylized. I really like the simplicity of how they shot, how they kill the guy. I mean, it's really simple, but it's just so effective because he comes up, the guy's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "It doesn't matter." He's like, "Well, what do you want?" It's like, "To kill you." And at this point, the guy, he's standing in the room in front of the guy is behind the desk. As soon as he gives his, and the camera sort of bounces between the two of them. As soon as he says to kill you, the camera cuts to the victim. We don't see Jeff at all. So we see him getting the gun to get ready to, attack him. And then we hear the gun fire, and the next shot is Jeff holding the gun. I like that, right? It almost adds a supernatural quality to him. We don't see Jeff pulling his gun out. It's just like, it gives the impression, although, like the gun appeared in his hand. He's that fast. The guy could not outdraw him. They don't show it. That's really great. And I'm sure that's been used in a lot of movies. And I wonder if this is the movie that started. There might be a Western or two that did it first. I don't know. But I just really like how that's done because it just gives this sort of aura of sort of invincibility about him. The guy's getting the gun ready. We hear the gun go off, but it's not his gun. It's Jeff's gun. He's already got it steady and held in his hand. And he shoots him like four times because that's
it reminds me of Breathless also because, you don't see the action there either. It's kind of like off center. Like you don't even see him fire the gun.
Right. Yeah. Breathless, I feel, that was sort of, deliberate. Again, it was sort of part of the whole breaking all the rules type thing, right? They're like, in most movies, they make a really big deal of showing him shooting the cop. And this, we'll just sort of hear the gun, see the cop fall, and then see him take off. This, it's a little more deliberate, and it's a little more stylized, but it is similar.
It takes the some of the drama out of it,
Yeah.
Some of the cruel intention, the harshness out.
Yeah. I mean, somebody mentioned that they really like Melville. I feel bad because, I think the only other Melville movie I've seen is Les Enfants Terribles, which I think he kind of co-directed with Jean Cocteau. I know his first movie was a movie called Le Silence de la Mer, which is supposed to be really good, but I haven't seen it yet. But that's sort of been on my list of movies to watch.
Let's see. No, he's a writer on that.
Oh, he didn't direct it?
Oh, no, I'm looking at...
something else. Okay.
Something else.
Oh, Silence de la Mer is not his... Oh, yeah, it is his first. Yeah, I was going to say. Because, yeah, I saw something else, but that was actually a short film. But, yeah, his first movie was in 1949, Le Silence de la Mer, which is based on a fairly famous story. But I did see the one he did after that called Les Enfants Terribles, which is a really interesting story about exactly sort of what it sounds like. These two sort of psychopathic siblings, kids. But yeah, he has a role in Breathless. Melville, I don't remember who. So obviously he was around that whole scene, and he knew those other guys, those guys from the French New Wave.
Man, he died 5 years after this movie came out.
Yeah, it's too bad because I mean he was 55, so you'd think he might have probably had a few more films in him when he died, that he probably wouldn't have retired.
Heart attack.
Yeah, unfortunate. I mean, 1973. It's like I said, 5 years after this one.
Unfortunate.
But another one of those directors with a really deliberate style that has just been imitated and homaged so much over the years in various things. Some to really good effect, and others not so much.
The opening scene, I think, really lets you know what you're in for, you know?
Right.
Just the lingering. And then it does some weird camera stuff at the end. And I mean, it's a solid few minutes, right? Of this guy just smoking on a bed, and you hear the bird in the background.
And even though it's in color, it's so heavily shadowed that you can barely see him on the bed, right? Like at first, if you didn't see like the smoke coming up, you might not know someone's on the bed, which is really cool.
Like, okay, I know what's coming now. You know, I know what I'm in for.
Yeah.
You know, with the...
And again, I think like it's so common now, and I'm not sure if this is the originator for it, but we've seen it again. It's sort of like a killer that lives a very Spartan existence. You know, he lives in an apartment that doesn't really have any furnishings or anything. He doesn't have a TV or anything like that. And it seems like his one joy is like maybe taking care of the bird, which we see with other things. Like, in fact, even in Leon the Professional, right? He likes plants, right? He likes to take care of plants. Like that's the thing that centers him and I guess keeps him calm. And, you know, when he doesn't always have to think about his work, which would be really intense and dangerous stuff. So, yeah. And of course, the bird does like help him later because apparently, you know, by the way the bird acts, it sort of tips him off to realize that somebody's been in his apartment, which is how he finds the bugs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how well bugging the apartment would have worked anyway. I don't even know if the guy had a phone. Like, what were they going to hear him say? He's going to have conversations with the bird. Yeah, he's going to like, hey, bird, let's have a discussion about how I killed that guy. But anyway.
Messed up when I did that, huh?
Because it seems like, he's really careful. Like he wouldn't, if somebody was going to contract him from a job, I doubt like he would agree to them coming to his apartment.
Mm-hmm. Which can't be legal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that can't hold up in a trial of any sort.
Right. I mean, you need some sort of probable cause.
Right.
Yeah, I always wonder how that worked. And I don't know how it works in different places. Because like the idea is like if the cops come to your house and say they want to come in and search the place, you can say no. And that means they can't come in. If you invite them, then fine, they can do what they want. But if you don't give them permission, then they need a warrant, which is not easy to get. And yeah, as far as like getting surveillance, you have to like get something from a judge. Remember they talked about it on The Wire, right?
Yeah.
Because they couldn't just do their surveillance in The Wire. They had to like build up some sort of case so the judge would allow them to do that. So I mean, the cop even makes that. Even he doesn't specifically say that. But remember, there's a part where the main cop is having a conversation with the girlfriend, and he says something that kind of to that effect. Because he says something like, "All that matters to him is like the result. Like it doesn't matter how he does it." He's basically saying, I'll bend laws and break laws or whatever to get the guy. I'll do what it takes. So you get that sense right off, and easy enough to believe. It's the '60s. Stuff wasn't as regimented back then.
And those cops are assholes.
Oh, they are. They're basically saying, we can do whatever we want to you people. We can call you in whenever we want. And
Dude, they just bully people around.
Yeah.
I was also kind of confused with some of their technology. Like it looked like was it like digital battleship or something at one point when they were like following him. You know, when they had the dragnet out,
Mm-hmm.
and like he's on the subway, and it's like a little blinking light on this grid, and then all of a sudden he's not. You know, he leaves the the car, the subway car, and then okay, it stops blinking. I was like, oh, he's gone now. Like, what is that?
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Because, I mean, all they did was get a bug in his room that he deactivates. Like, they didn't get anything that he was on his person, I don't think.
I don't know if they had that technology then.
And one thing he proves is that he's really good at eluding the cops. Because there's a couple times in the movies where he shakes them. That last time was hardest, and I think they tried to trip him up by putting that woman on him, right? Because back in the 60s, you probably wouldn't really necessarily expect a woman to be working with them, you know?
Yeah, Jacob, I'm actually watching that right now. That part of The Wire.
Is that season 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that. I will.
Yeah, oh, you haven't gotten to 4? Okay, well, I won't spoil it then.
Yeah. I'll get some stuff done. I mean, I just watched the season 1 of True Detective. I mean, I've watched it before, but I mean, it was cool watching it again.
That's a great show. Season 4 is just really sad to me because it focuses on the kids. It intersplices the inner city and the cops and with the teachers at the school and the kids there. And it's
The Wire?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, The Wire, yeah.
And season 5 maybe. Season 4, whichever season it is.
I've watched season 1 a couple times. I've watched season 2, and I've watched like the first few episodes of 3. I need to get through 3 and get going. I mean, I'm good enough that I could just start at 3 again. Like, I remember stuff. I know where things fall, what happens. So what I should do is just watch 3 all the way through and then get into 4 as far as The Wire goes.
This time I skipped 2, even though I like 2. I wanted more of the the Omar and the
I actually like 2 a lot too. I liked that it was like a different group of people down by and it reminded me a little bit of Halifax, because Halifax has that whole thing. We're a big port city. The containers. There's just so many containers. I see them all over the place.
That was probably really polarizing to the audience as well.
Yeah, that departure, right? Yeah, they were all so invested in those characters and what was going on there, and then it jumped and moved over, and for a while didn't deal with that at all. Eventually, it did intersect a little bit, but I like how it was like McNulty. He got in trouble, even though they got stuff done in the first season. He got in trouble, so they kind of like to get rid of him, put him on like Harbor Patrol or whatever, which put him in the whole sphere of the dock stuff. But yeah. I will, yeah. What I should do is just start at 3 again, watch it all the way through, and then I can move forward. Because I've never watched beyond maybe episode 4 or 5 of 3. And I mean, it's all there on HBO for me. I mean, that's how I just watched True Detective, so should do that.
3's good. I think they're all good, honestly. I think that's a great show. Good that it ended when it did.
Yeah. The other thing that obviously makes this movie seem so American in some of its style is the fact that Melville himself was very interested in American pop culture. He really drank it up from a young age. It was a big deal to him. So it's no surprise that influence would bleed over into his movies. I mean, he had a really interesting life. He was part of the French resistance during World War II.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty badass. And I mean, and again, his real name wasn't Melville. He adopted Melville from the American writer who wrote, the guy that wrote Moby Dick.
Right.
So, yeah, obviously had a lot of admiration for a lot of American culture, literature, and movies and stuff like that. Yeah, he worked with Jean Cocteau, which is it's funny. In all the time we talked about some of these French directors from the era, we have not talked about Cocteau, and he's a super interesting figure. He was dead by the time this movie came out, but I mean, he would have been older. But one of the movies that's been of his that's actually been on my list to do with this is his film the 1946 Beauty and the Beast, which I think is one of the most important like fantasy movies. It's just a really great movie.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
It's really good. I mean, it is the story. It's Beauty and the Beast, but yeah. And it is interesting how much like the Disney movie does take from it. But it's one of those. It's really interesting to me to see fantasy movies that old because they have to rely on different sorts of effects because you don't have like computer stuff. So it's all like really interesting practical effects. There's one part like where she first shows up in the castle, and there's this whole part where like there's like human hands coming out of the walls and they're moving like this. It's really eerie and cool. And I mean, they're real. It's real humans in real life doing that. So there's all sorts of really cool imagery and stuff like that. So yeah, he's probably most famous for Beauty and the Beast. But he wrote the screenplay of Les Enfants Terribles, which he did like that. He's not a guy that had a huge presence in film. He was a polymath. He did everything. He was a poet, a novelist, a playwright. He did theater. I'm pretty sure he could paint. He did stained glass. And he was just, one of those really multi-talented people that had their fingerprints all over stuff. But yeah, either of those movies would be interesting to do at some point. I mean, obviously we don't want to overdose too much on French cinema, but Beauty and the Beast and Les Enfants Terribles, which again technically was directed by Melville, would both be maybe worth exploring at some point down the line.
Sure.
But yeah, you made me think, that the cops are more important in this movie than maybe I originally gave them credit for. Because I think originally in viewing this movie, I more thought of the cops as, they're there to react. They're there to serve the purpose of chasing him. But it is true that the cops, the way they act and the way they talk, does serve more of a purpose than just pushing the narrative forward. You get sort of an idea of how they operate and the way they view their place in society. That basically, they can just push people around and do whatever they want to get the job done, and the ends justifies the means, which you'll see in a lot of movies about law enforcement, to the point where a lot of these movies with cops, we are actually rooting for them. I mean, how many movies have we seen where like cops are like beating confessions out of suspects, and it's not presented in a way to be like, these are shitty cops. It's like, no, he's doing what he have to do. The audience is on board. We're on their side. So like, yeah, they're not playing it by the book. They're doing what they have to do. But I like that this movie is not really on the cop side. I mean, our main guy is not a hero. He's a passionless killer, but I guess the whole point of being the samurai and the Bushido thing is you're saying he's got a code of honor. He doesn't just like murder whoever. Although maybe he will, because his reasoning is, if somebody pays me, I'll kill. Like, he doesn't necessarily point out having any rules. Like in The Professional, Leon states like he won't kill women or children. We don't know this about our guy. I bet he he makes it sound like he is willing to kill women, because the whole thing is like, of course, the whole thing is that he doesn't. But we don't know if that has anything to do with like the fact that she's a woman. I mean, might as well jump to the ending. Like,
yeah,
we know what his plan was, but we don't 100% understand. I went up further. Okay, there we go. Because, so there's this whole thing where even though the job went more or less smoothly, he did get picked up by the cops, and he is somewhat suspected. But still, they don't have anything on him. But there is a point where that makes his employers nervous. They think, this could get out. He could, trace it back to us. Maybe we should kill him. So they send another killer to pay him, in the guise of paying him to actually kill him. And the guy doesn't manage. He shoots at him. He wounds him, but doesn't kill him. And then during that, they reassess the situation. They think, okay, it's not as bad as we thought. This can be done. How about we'll just wipe the slate clean? We'll say, hey, no hard feelings for us trying to kill you. Let's let it go. We'd rather hire you for a new job. And that doesn't go over so well because the guy, they send him again. Costello gets the drop on him. He basically tricks him into putting his gun away. But then he does decide to hear him out because what he says is, we've got another contract. At the time, the audience doesn't know what it is, but I'm pretty sure you suspected, right?
Yeah.
That it was going to be the piano player. So I don't think it's too much of a shock to find out that that's what it was. And you understand the reasoning behind it because she's the other link, right? Because it turns out, she was living with the head guy.
But if you jump to the very end, I was thinking like, he's not going to do it anyway. But it turns out that his gun didn't even have any bullets in it.
Yeah, and we know that he took them out because it shows him checking the gun before he was in the club, and it is loaded. So obviously he deliberately took the gun out. So his whole idea was he knew the cops were on him to get shot. He never intended to kill her. But at first he tried to make it look like he was, he was going to follow that sort of code. It was like, well, I was paid. She says, like, why? He says, because I was paid to, and that's his code. And then we realize, no, his code is a little more complex, but we don't all completely understand the reasoning behind it. Is it because he feels indebted to her because she did lie on his behalf? Is it because he developed feelings for her? Or is it some other reason? We don't know. We don't get to know that. But we do know he makes this deliberate choice. Like, I'm not actually going to kill her, but I'm going to, set it up so that the cops will have to shoot me. Because I think obviously part of his code is don't get arrested.
Yeah.
Go out shot. And apparently there was an alternate ending of this where he's actually smiling when he gets killed, and they took that out, which I think is better. I realize how that could have had an impact because he was the whole point was he doesn't show his emotions or anything, and they're trying to show, he went out on his own terms, he's actually happy. And the only reason they took it out was because apparently it had been done in some other movie just shortly before that, and they didn't want to look like they were copying it. But I think it's better not to have the, grinning death. I'd rather have him go out sort of stoic and emotionless because that's the way he lived. I think that's better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So what do you think the reason was that he didn't have bullets in the gun?
I know, because you could look at it one way and say, even if he intended to die, the plan still works if he actually kills her. And then you could say he's following one code of honor because he's fulfilling his contract. The contract was to kill her. So he could fulfill that, but fulfill it in such a way, because the whole point was, he doesn't do it the way he would do it if he intended to survive. He goes in, he lets everybody see him, he lets them see him put on the white gloves, he gets right up in front of everybody with the gun. That's not how he would do it if he intended to succeed. So yeah, you're right. He could have killed her for real and still had his plan work the way he wanted and get killed himself, but he doesn't. So I don't know. I think that, it's hard to know if it just was his code or if something did change. If normally he would have, been perfectly content to kill her, and that just maybe she made an impression on him. I don't know. They don't have a lot of time together or anything.
Yeah.
So there really is no definitive answer. I think I have to feel like he wouldn't have killed a person in that situation. Not just because she's a woman, but just because of her place as somewhat of an innocent.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, because when she the first thing, when he asks her, why did you lie for me? She doesn't answer him. She answers his question with a question. She says, why did you kill the club guy? And he just says, because I was paid to. She said, well, what did he ever do to you? And she said, nothing. I never knew him. The first and last time I met him was when I killed him, which, is par for the course. He's this passionless killer. That's what he does. It's his whole thing. So it's why would he be rattled about having to kill her? So So you don't know if something changed or if that was part of his code all along, that he wouldn't kill somebody in her position. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But
I don't have really a theory. I really don't know.
It definitely, makes him, martyrs him at the end, and makes him look that much better. He's the anti-hero, of this film.
They come right up. The cops come up to her and say, you're pretty lucky. You came really close to getting killed. And then the other cop shows the gun and says, nope, empty.
I feel like the cops are the bad guy in this movie.
Right, and he makes them look like fools throughout the movie, pretty much.
Yeah.
He outmaneuvers them kind of at every turn. And then when they finally have caught him, he, makes it so they have to take him out and not not arrest him. Because for him, that would be the true disgrace or defeat, which is one thing that does have in common with samurai. Samurai aren't supposed to be captured in battle. So that is one parallel that actually works. It's seen as pretty disgraceful to be a samurai and be captured in battle, which unfortunately carried forward so far into the Japanese consciousness that even decades after, the samurais didn't exist anymore, a lot of Japanese soldiers that fought in World War II, if they had been prisoners of war, they lived through the war, if they returned home, their families shunned them, and people in general shunned them because you weren't supposed to get captured by the enemy.
If you're captured, you kill yourself.
Yeah.
Or kill yourself before you get captured.
You're supposed to go down fighting. And I mean, that was basically how Japan fought the war. There's real life instances of times where, especially on some of those specific islands they did fighting on, where you'd have like a battalion of troops and they'd be in a place where they're overwhelmed. They're fighting the American forces and there's too much for them. And the captain or whoever will order like a final attack, which is like a suicidal charge, right? Sometimes that actually, against all odds, worked. They survived and they pushed back the Americans. And the only thing that the captain could do was just say, "We'll do it again." Just do it until you fucking die, because that's what we're supposed to do here. So, yeah, that actually happened. I don't know how many times, but quite a few times, where basically that was the playbook for the higher command in the Japanese army was once something becomes unwinnable, well, you don't surrender or anything. You fight till the end. And you order your troops into kamikaze charges and suicidal charges until it works. But there were at least some survivors to talk about that. And again, a lot of them would have been regarded with scorn by their own people. So it's a pretty tough position. So yeah, that goes back to the samurai. So that is one thing this guy did have in common with the samurai, because I'm nitpicking saying he's not really like a samurai. Well, no, there are some things, and I'm not going to really nitpick. I mean, it sounds cool. The idea of a warrior living by a warrior code. Sure, samurai, that's like probably the first thing you think of, besides maybe like sort of the English knights of the medieval period that had, the chivalry and their own code of honor too. Those are probably the two main ones you think of when you sort of think of a warrior code, right?
I think of like Russian spies, like a cyanide tooth,
Yeah, I mean that's less warrior, but still, it's
never get captured. Have you ever seen Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai?
No, but I was reading about it before this. Like Forrest Whitaker's in it. Apparently, it has some callbacks to this movie too, huh?
Yeah, apparently. I've seen it, but. Because also he's supposed to be a loner assassin living by like a Bushido code, apparently. Oh, it's very similar in that regard, yeah.
Yeah. I remember hearing about it. It's just one of those movies that sort of came and went. I mean, I'd be interested in seeing it.
It's not terrible. It's just funny that Forrest Whitaker is playing that character. I mean, he was, a little overweight and.
Yeah, it's hard to buy that. Like this is like a really effective assassin, right?
Right. That's Jim Jarmusch.
Because usually when we see these assassins, the movies go out of their way to like show that they're really tough in some way. This movie doesn't really, but I mean, he just has that sort of aura. He just seems extremely competent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with the driver, which is interesting, and we'll talk about it again next week when we do it. But because he's not an assassin, he's a driver. That's his job. He's the getaway driver. He's not a hitman or anything. But there are some moments in that movie where if he has to get physical, he's pretty good at it. Which I mean, I get to a certain extent.
Sure.
But I mean, it all depends on how you want to approach that. Like another movie, there's various movies about getaway drivers, and the most recent one is probably Baby Driver, which is a really great movie. But the whole idea of Baby Driver was like he drives and that's it. He's not there to intimidate somebody. He's not there to put a gun in somebody's face or any of that. He drives and that's what he does. So there's different sort of rules, I guess, depending on who decides who's doing the movie about a getaway driver. So how do you say this? This is the type of 90s stuff that I don't know enough about. The music is by, do you say RZA?
RZA, yeah.
RZA. Okay. I was pretty sure it was RZA, but yeah. When I see RZA, I'm not really sure if I'm just supposed to say RZA or RZA or. Some people say the RZA.
He has a few different names he goes by.
Yeah, okay. I'm just looking at the Ghost Samurai thing here, Ghost Dog, and he did the music. He did the music for that, and actually
the music
role.
in this film is really interesting too. The score.
Oh, I love the score. Yeah,
really
that's a really good point. Because going back to Breathless, I liked how Breathless had sort of like that kind of simple, sort of jazzy thing to it. I like how this one, since it's more serious, being an assassin, is very somber. I don't know. There's some different sort of instrumentation going on there. There's a few sounds that I couldn't really identify. I don't know if it was a trick with some strings or what. And I'm usually have a good ear for these things, but I just remember now. I can't think now. I need to hear it, but.
Dumb mistake by getting seen. Yeah,
I guess, but at the same time, I'm not sure what his options were. He has to go kill somebody in a crowded club. And I mean, the cops really didn't have anything on him. His plan mostly worked. Like, he understood he was going to be seen by witnesses. He realized how unreliable witnesses were. It worked to his favor. And he also managed to trick that guy into giving him a solid alibi by saying, "Oh, I definitely saw him, when he was at the girl's apartment." So, I mean, his plan, the only reason the cops got where they got, as we said, was sort of by like breaking their own rules, by doing things that were definitely not within the law. I mean, at one point when they're, when they have that whole dragnet thing, what would even be the consequences of them catching him? What could they charge him with?
Right.
It's important to him to not get caught and not get slowed down. But at the same time, they're like, "Oh, we're closing in on him. We're going to catch him." You're going to catch him with what? He doesn't carry a gun unless he's on the job. He throws the gun away after he does the job. This is a guy that thinks stuff through and is effective. Yeah, I want to see the Ghost Dog movie just to check it out.
I mean, it may be worth maybe even doing in the future. But I really kind of disagree with what Jacob said there. Like, I think the lack of fleshing out the character, I think, is intentional here, as to where he's, he's just a ghost. Like, all is he's just this guy who, much like the score, is just this somber guy who appears to be, rather unhappy. He doesn't really have any friends,
Yeah,
he has
living a very Spartan existence.
Yeah, I mean, he just kind of exists,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what's out of character about this guy, because the whole point is they don't give us much to know. That's why the ending is interesting, because we can only sort of guess about what his thought process was going into it, because we don't know quite enough about his character. We know that it's unacceptable to get arrested. It was also unacceptable to continue. Oh, you could also say that's the other thing. I hadn't thought of this, because remember, it's like he was hot. He says, like, his justification is like, "I was hired to, and that's why I'll kill you." And of course, he doesn't kill her. It's like, well, wait a second. If that was his rule, why wouldn't he? Maybe it has nothing to do with her personally. Maybe it's because of the boss in the first place. Because remember, he killed him before that. Maybe he thinks this contract is no longer valid because it's by a boss that, or by a client that, as far as I'm concerned, betrayed me to the point that I took it upon myself to kill him. So maybe that's why. Maybe he feels like, whatever code I live by, or whatever rules, all bets were off once this guy betrayed me by sending somebody to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Olivier Ray.
Just out of principle, I'm not going to do it because. Yeah.
I mean, he makes a point to visit Olivier Ray and kill him. So that gives us a little more insight into his own code. It's like, yeah, I'll do any job for money and stuff, but if I feel like you betray me in some way, then I'll go right back at you. Because so at this point, the idea is he's going to be fulfilling the contract for a client that's already dead, and dead by his own hand. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I liked seeing the Paris subway.
Yeah, me too.
I used to know more about it because I'm trying to think. It's the second busiest system in all of Europe after apparently the Moscow metro, which is one nobody ever even thinks about, I don't think. But man, it opened in 1900. Because I was thinking in 1967, I was thinking it probably hadn't been around that long. But it had been. It opened in 1900. Wow.
I would have thought the underground would have been on there somewhere.
No, I'm sure it is. Those are just the top two, apparently. I'm sure the underground is up there as well. But yeah, Subway's so much older than I thought. I guess I'm fascinated because I've never lived in a city that has one or anything like that.
Yeah.
When I visited New York, I never even went down there to see it. And the only Canadian cities that I think really have it are, I think, Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. There might be one in one of the Alberta cities. I'm not sure. One of the things that's cool about the Montreal system, it's funny, is they actually started getting built around the year that this movie takes place. Because I know I've talked before about how when I was a kid growing up, we used to have those a part of our heritage commercials. You can watch them all on YouTube, and they're fun. And one was about how the metro got built, because the idea was in 1967, that was when, remember when the World Expo was a big deal? Expo 67 took place in Montreal. And one of the main things about the pavilion there was they built a bunch of artificial islands out on the river or lake or something there. And they built it by taking the stuff they dug up for the subway. They were building the subway at the same time. So they took what they dug out and used it to make the islands, which is pretty cool. But yeah, one of the other cool things is I'll do this someday, is I want to go to a Montreal Canadiens game. And if you go to the Montreal Canadiens game at the Bell Center, you can take a subway that goes right into the Bell Center. Like you get out and you're in the building, which is pretty cool.
Wow, that's cool.
Which is really cool. So, there's 31 teams in the NHL, and I think easily the one to go to see a home game at is Montreal for sure. And I'm a Leafs fan, but the Bell Center, it's the biggest and nicest rink. It has a capacity of like over 20-some thousand, which makes it pretty damn big for an NHL arena. Like most of them are about 18,000. But yeah, someday. But yeah, so I've always sort of have a fascination with the subway. The New York one, of course, too, for being so crime ridden. I know we talked about this. We talked about like a dangerous or a most violent year. We're talking about the crazy crime. There was a part in the 70s and early 80s and stuff where basically public servants and cops and stuff, their message to the public was, don't take the subway. Like, that's how little control they had over it. Like, you need the subway for the city to work. You need people to pay their fares and everything. It's people's jobs. And it's so infested with crime that you're literally just telling people, no, don't take the subway. Like, it's not worth it. You'll be the victim of a crime. Like, they told people that. They didn't say, here's some tips for being careful on the subway. They said, don't fucking use the subway because we have no control over the rampant crime.
Wow.
So that's always interested me. Remember in the mid-'80s, Bernie Goetz shot those guys. Then he ran for mayor because he thought people thought it was awesome, but nobody voted for him because they didn't care that some nobody shot people on the subway. And that kind of thing is you see it in movies too, something like Death Wish, which actually predated. I think you might even got the idea from Death Wish. It's one thing to if you're one of those people that carries a gun for protection and you get mugged and you use your gun to defend yourself. It's another thing where you're Bernie Goetz and nothing. I don't think any ever happened to him. And he just bought a gun and purposely started riding the subway late at night so that somebody would mug him so that he could shoot them. Isn't that a whole different thing? Yeah, exactly. I can't remember legally how that went down. It didn't really happen the way he wanted it to.
Kind of reminds me of the Trayvon Martin thing. Kind of similar.
Yeah. Right.
This guy wanted to play cops and robbers.
Yeah, that whole stand your ground thing doesn't make any sense to me. There's a few states that have it, not all of them.
I'm not even sure what that is.
It's something like if somebody threatens you, rather than running away, I don't know. It's weird because the guy he shot didn't have a gun, which was why it's such a big deal, right? Like the person he shot was actually unarmed, right? But there was this whole loophole about I don't know, something about feeling like he's still being physically threatened. And even though because there's one thing, let's say you're accosted by somebody and you're like up against a wall or in an alleyway, there's no way out, right? Like if you have a gun, use it. But in this case, this guy easily could have left. He was in no way like cornered. So that's another thing. I mean, that George Zimmerman, that was the thing. I mean, he's a pretty sick guy. Like he auctioned off the gun he used to kill that kid and made like $400,000 off it. Like no wonder
that's fucked up.
No wonder people were outraged, right?
What is that like on display at the KKK headquarters?
Yeah, I know, right? Oh man, yeah, it's pretty sickening.
I understand the stand your ground thing, but it doesn't seem like that is even a case for it. But whatever. It is what it is. I know like if I hit somebody if I'm drinking and driving and I run somebody over, regardless, I'm getting, manslaughter.
Right. Like intent doesn't come into that. It has nothing to do with intent. You did it and it happened.
I mean, that was an accident. This was intentional,
Right, exactly. And exactly. You can do something that's an accident and still have serious criminal charges leveled against you. So yeah. You could even get manslaughter.
People may use deadly force when they reasonably believe it to be necessary to defend against deadly force. Great bodily harm, kidnapping, rape.
Right. And it's really hard to reasonably define that, right, in a moment. Like, you don't know what the person has or what they're going to do or anything like that. So that's why it gets all muddy. And then, like, the people arguing, saying, like, this was like a teenager without any weapons at all. And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
Here's one, like, I've always wondered about, like, if, like, I know, let's say you have, like, a gun or something, and you see somebody being, like, brutally attacked.
Mm-hmm.
You can shoot the person attacking them, and, there's no problem there. But what if you see, like, somebody, like, raping somebody? Like, a rape is a bad thing, but it doesn't actually kill anybody. Are you justified in, like, blowing their head off to stop the rape? Because you're not saving the person's life.
And I've watched a lot of, like, court cases and stuff, and I've seen, like, longer sentences on rapes than murders usually. Yeah. You have a brutal rape, you'll do life in prison, where a murder, you may.
It's certainly reasonable to assume that sometimes if somebody is like is raping somebody, that they plan to kill them afterwards, so they don't have a witness, so they can't talk. But I mean, still, you don't know. Like, if I had the choice, I realize you never know what you're going to do in a moment, and things happen fast. Like, if you could just pull the person off, and then if they fight you, if you have the gun, use it. It seems like crazy to me that you could just. I don't even know if there's any real life examples of it anyway. I'm just thinking, like, technically, rape is a horrible thing, and you should stop it if you see it. But is lethal force, like, necessary?
Or what if you see someone get kidnapped?
Yeah.
And you shoot the kidnapper.
I mean, that's why I have a problem with, like, how so many of these, like, citizens, like, use their guns, right? Like, I understand, like, it sucks, like, if, like, there's looting or something and you have, like, a store and that's your livelihood, but I can't imagine, like, shooting somebody in the back while they run off with your stuff. Like, to me, that's not worth it. I couldn't do that. Like, I'd be really upset. I would not be happy that I'm being victimized by criminals who are stealing from me, but I don't think I would have it in me to, like, apply lethal force to them to get them to drop the TV or whatever. And that happens, like, quite a bit in the U.S.
Yeah.
But anyway, we don't need to get into all those arguments, but yeah. But the subway in New York is much safer nowadays. But it's just funny it's funny, but it's also crazy to reflect on a time where, like, it was so bad that, like, they didn't have control over it to the point where they just told people don't take the subway, which is just kind of crazy because that's one of the things that makes the city work. They're like, just don't do it. But
did you ever hear about the King's Crossfire?
Yeah.
In,
I think so.
Piccadilly Station, I believe it was. It was in the underground. It's so crazy, man. They had this. I'm going to share the screen here just to show what this looks like.
Back in the 80s.
They had wooden escalators. It's so wild. Like beneath there, see, like this picture here shows, like it was, well, not that one, but it was all like the lubrication. Like they would lube up that wooden escalator and it would all collect down below. And it's like all these people died because they were, I mean, the fire started, people smoked in there still, So fire started somehow. And the lubrication just spread really quickly, and all the people were trapped down there.
31 people died. It seems like one of those ones, like when you find out the details, you're like, how could this have been allowed to happen? Like, didn't you realize this is a horrible recipe for disaster?
Well, just the term wooden escalator sounds bad to me.
Yeah, isn't there going to be some friction involved there? Like, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I remember hearing that. It happened longer ago than I thought. Apparently it happened in 1987.
But still, you would think in 87 they're still using wood. Anyway.
Yeah, at that point, you just wonder if it's just them cheaping out or some sort of aesthetic choice. I don't know, like that. And smoking wasn't even banned until 84. Like, imagine smoking in an area like that on those trains. But yeah, the London Underground is interesting. There's quite a few movies that show off parts of it. Even some of the James Bonds do. It was obviously a big part of London during the Blitz.
Mm-hmm.
People sheltering. But yeah, all that stuff really interests me. Like I said, if someday I do wind up living in Japan, I really look forward to, at least at first, before the novelty wears off, like taking subways and bullet trains.
Bullet train, fuck yeah.
That fascinates the hell out of me.
Yeah, man.
I definitely want to check that out.
Trains in general to me are kind of scary, though.
Yeah?
Just the number of people that have died in train accidents. Like, you're much more likely to die in a train accident than a plane crash, right?
That is true. And you're thinking, why is that? You're just on a fucking track. It's not like a jet engine. It doesn't have all the complications of a jet engine and altitude and landing. And like, this should be really simple, you know?
This thing, so many thousands of feet in the sky is safer than.
Yeah, it's funny. So there was this bit on Family Guy where Peter's like riding like one of those like kid trains in the mall. And it starts going out of control. And he's like, oh, this is crazy. This is as dangerous as riding a real Amtrak train. Then he goes, that's legally defensible, by the way. Here's examples. And then suddenly there's this long list of like actual train accidents and derailments in the history of Amtrak. I looked some of them up and they're bonkers. Some of it's like train ran into tractor on tracks. It's like, why was there a tractor on the tracks? And how come you couldn't stop in time? Like, and some of them's like collision with other train. It's like, what kind of schedule involves hitting another train? It's like
someone fucked up.
Yeah, what do you? Yeah, somebody definitely fucked up. But I don't know. I've always been interested in like the romantic aspect of train travel, right? Go back to its early roots. Basically, from its start in like the 1860s or whatever, going up to the first half of the 20th century, before it really started getting replaced by air travel, it was sort of like the way to travel, and especially like the luxury cars they would have for the rich, all that really. And now, just like how you can get like fancy cruises, like you can get fancy train rides nowadays too that cost like tons of money where you go and stuff. I'd like to go, like, there's some interesting ones in Canada where I'd love to go on one where you go out west and see the Rocky Mountains and stuff. Like, that would be so cool. Mm-hmm. As I said, the train here via rail, it doesn't run from Sydney anymore. When my parents were like younger, you could go from Sydney to Halifax, but now it like starts in Halifax. But to this day, I could go down to the via rail station and get a ticket and ride to Montreal. It's just expensive as hell. It's like $700 or something crazy. It's a lot, man. It's like I'm sure a flight would be cheaper. But I mean, that's just via rail, and I'd like to do that. And there's nothing romantic or cool about it. But yeah, all that stuff, like, like back in of course, the Orient Express, which is gone now, but all sorts of cool train things. Like, imagine like riding a train through the Alps.
The Trans-Siberian Railroad.
Yeah. All that stuff has always really fascinated me.
Yeah.
And I remember maybe about a decade ago, one of those hockey days in Canada that I watched, one of the really good ones. And, they report from all sorts of different places throughout Canada, little rinks where kids are skating and stuff. But one time they had this thing where part of it was from like one of those trains out west, out on the prairies. And they had this car that was all done up with hockey stuff. And I thought it was so cool. So yeah, I have ridden a train before. It's been a long time. When the first time I went to Toronto, when I was a little kid, I was 7 years old, we rode the train from Toronto to Ottawa, which is not particularly long, but that does count as a train trip. I think that's the only time I ever did like a train trip. I remember loving just being on the monorail at Disney World. It felt so futuristic at the time. I mean, there was a time like back at like around that time, this is when like late 80s, early 90s, where like people really thought like monorails were really going to take off in cities by now. And it has not happened.
Yeah. Monorail.
Of course, the famous Simpsons episode about the monorail. Yeah. Is there a chance the track could bend? Not on your life, my Hindu friend. The ring came off my pudding can. Take my... I know the whole thing. I'm going to shut up. That's another episode that I could just recite.
Steamed hams?
That was a fun rabbit hole a couple years ago. I got obsessed with those for a while.
Just wonder why. But yeah, some of them are great.
Yeah, where did it come from? But yeah. That, of course, comes from the 22 short films about Springfield, which is in my top 5, a favorite Simpsons episode, which has, of course, a section that is, whatchamacallit, Pulp Fiction. Speaking a bit of Tarantino. And Tarantino, of course, being one of the many people influenced by this movie in its style. Tarantino never met a movie about assassins he didn't like. Even shitty ones he likes. Oh, was that Taking Pelham 1, 2, 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that.
The original, I think Denzel remade.
Yeah, it's in the 70s. Yeah, I saw the original 70s one. Yeah, I'm trying to think, what movies have I seen where the subway plays a big part? There's that cool part in Die Hard with a Vengeance where he has to get the bomb off the train, and does the train jump up into, or is it just the explosion? There's some movie I saw where the train actually like comes up out from under the ground and goes up onto the street, but I don't think it's that one. But maybe it is.
It blows a hole to where you can see the street, but
yeah,
I don't think
like he gets the bomb off the train, but it still goes off. It makes like a huge explosion. But yeah,
I've added the incident to my list. One subway movie that Jacob has recommended.
But yeah, I like subway stuff, train stuff. It's interesting.
I feel like there's a lot.
There was another Denzel Washington movie about like a train, right? With like Chris Pine, Non-Stop or something. I don't know. I didn't see it.
Or what about Money Train?
I have not seen that. And of course, there's the Michael Crichton movie based on the book with the same name, The Great Train Robbery from '79. Yeah, I like train robberies too. There's a certain romance to that.
Yeah,
like the old West type thing, but that wasn't Old West. That was old England.
The one we covered, the good, the bad, and the weird.
Right. That opens with a cool train robbery. Yeah, yeah. I love the idea of that train going up across Manchuria. Yeah, it's cool stuff in like the 40s or whatever. Yeah, I've always found there's something very romantic about the trains back then. Not so much now, but interesting. But yeah, you wonder like why something so simple, just riding on a track. Oh, that's a really interesting tie-in. Mr. This and Mr. That. Why am I Mr. Pink? I remember that bit.
Yeah.
But wasn't one of them like not really like? Wasn't one Mr. Blonde, which is a color, but it's only. But don't you only? Isn't that like people only use blonde for hair, right? Like people don't say that's a blonde painting or a blonde blanket.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. That
was Michael. Fuck, the guy who cuts the ear off. Spoiler alert for Reservoir Dogs.
Michael Madsen.
Wasn't he Mr. Blonde?
Yeah. I can't remember. All I remember, Steve Buscemi's Mr. Pink.
Yeah.
Michael Madsen's in there.
Mr. Orange.
Who else is in there?
Fucking Mr. Orange.
The guy we did for Harvey Keitel. He's one of them, isn't he?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie because I don't like it.
Tim Roth.
Tim Roth is in. Tim Roth's in there. Yeah. Oh, I've always been a big fan of Tim Roth. He's really
he's great.
Guy. Yeah. I've got no problem with him.
I don't dislike
Reservoir Dogs. Watching that movie anytime soon. I've watched that movie enough times to know I'm not going to change my mind. Sometimes, if I didn't like a movie when I was younger, I revisit it and I like it more. But I've seen that movie enough. I'm not going to change about that movie. I don't like it. I don't understand why it launched Tarantino's career. And I like Tarantino. I think he got good. But I
do think it's overrated. But I don't dislike the film. And Pulp Fiction I love. And Jackie Brown I love even more.
Yeah, I like Pulp Fiction. I also think it's overrated, but I like it. I don't like Jackie Brown at all. I just can't get into it. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in those characters. I mean, I have to give him credit because it's kind of going against convention because it's not like just, young, cool, hip, good-looking characters. It's some sort of it's like middle-aged characters, right? They're kind of boring and middle-aged. I give him credit for making them the main characters, but I just don't care. I don't care about anything in that movie. I don't care what happens.
Have you ever seen some of the interviews where Tarantino talks like a black person? Like when he's around black people, he talks like a black person?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. That's pretty bad, man.
I think it's funny.
It's so transparent. I don't even know how he would defend it. I mean, it comes across as so ridiculous.
It's like he thinks that he's got like a pass to say the N-word or something.
Yeah, which he loves to throw in his movies. Which I don't think necessarily makes him racist or anything. I think it's more like he just thinks he has some sort of coolness with black people, which is kind of silly.
He thinks, yeah.
Like, I'm friends with Samuel Jackson, so that means everything.
But that
I will say Samuel Jackson's scene in that movie is really good.
Was it Django? I can't remember. I think it was Django when he was doing that interview. I think it was on BET. Like, everyone else in the room was black but him. And everybody's just rolling their eyes at this guy. And they're like, oh, God damn it. Samuel, what's his name? Jamie Foxx. They're all just like,
oh man.
God damn, dude.
That's bad.
That man.
Jamie Foxx is the main guy, isn't he? He's the main guy in Django. Yeah. We talked about this before. I don't like Jamie Foxx in like anything until I finally watched that Pixar movie Soul. That's like the first movie I've ever liked him in, and he's only doing a voice. It's not like I have to look at his stupid face. Don't like Jamie Foxx.
Any Given Sunday, you love that one.
Yeah, I actually did put that on. I found it and watched the rest of it with you guys when you were doing that. I don't like that movie at all. I mean, it's not like in the annals as like some terrible movie. I just don't like it.
Yeah. Well, it's just a stupid movie. Yeah. I just thought it'd be fun to talk about. Anyway,
I like a lot of Tarantino's, and this isn't Tarantino, but I mean, I like a lot of Tarantino's movies, but I don't like watching him in interviews, period. Like, even take out the cringy, black stuff. I don't like listening to hear him talk. Like, usually with a filmmaker, I like hearing them talk about their process and their movies. I don't like listening to him. I'm like, shut up. You're going to make me dislike the movie. You sound so dumb. Like, I don't know. I don't know if he feels like he feels, and this even extends beyond like talking, think, oh, I'll use Ebonics and talk like a black person. I think in general, he just sort of kind of dumbs down the way he talks because maybe he thinks it's more accessible or something, or it's more like what his fan base is, or it's more he wants to separate himself from like, directors that think of themselves as so artistic or whatever. I don't know what it is, but I do not ever enjoy seeing him in an interview. Like, I'm like, shut up, man. I don't care. I can't really give a specific example. I just mean I'm never interested in anything he has to say. Even like I love Kill Bill. I don't even want to hear him talk about it because he sounds like just like a 5-year-old talking about it.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's the cocaine or what, but it's like his mouth can't catch up to his brain. He's like stuttering and lisping all over the place. And
I'll shut up about Tarantino after this, but I'll say it one more time. Give it a rest with the fucking feet, man. We get it. You have a foot fetish. That doesn't mean you have to shove it right in our faces in every goddamn movie. I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, I'd actually forgotten about it, and then I went to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in theaters, and there's 2 friggin' scenes where, like, and I'm watching in theaters, so it's massive right up in your face. So he's got, like, the females, 2 different actresses putting their bare feet right up for no reason except that he loves them. I mean, didn't you get enough of that when you got like Salma Hayek to step on your face in
yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
I mean, that was that was the best moment of his entire life. There's no topping that. Dusk Till Dawn.
And
like, he didn't write Dusk Till Dawn, right?
Yeah. He may have wrote it. He did
write it. I was going to say, I knew he was in it, and it was directed by Rodriguez, so I wasn't sure if he wrote it. I was going to say, I don't know if he wrote it or not, but he wrote that bit. That was his specific direction, was that then Salma Hayek would stick her foot in his face. I mean, I get it. I don't like feet, but I would accept that from a goddess that Salma Hayek was in like 1996 or whatever, sure. But I just mean...
he wrote the screenplay.
Yeah. And that part was probably written in bold, and like highlighter. This is an essential scene, cannot be cut.
Either this happens or I'm not doing the movie.
Yeah. Selmo, that was good, but we need to do another take.
Do 2 more.
Oh man. Anyway, yes, I think he's kind of insufferable, but I am generally a fan of his movies. I'm just weird in that, like, most of the movies like that people key on, I'm not as interested in, and it's the other ones I like. The ones I like best are the Kill Bills and Inglourious Bastards. Those are my favorites.
Glorious Bastards is great. Yeah,
I'm gonna watch that again soon because it's been a while. I was thinking about it because recently, whatchamacallit, I watched a big chunk of almost a Goodwill Hunting. A big chunk of Saving Private Ryan was on TV a few weeks ago, and it was on, and I watched a big chunk of it, and it made me think of World War II movies, and I was kind of thinking I should watch Glorious Bastards again. We haven't really done war movies on here, have we?
I'm not the biggest fan of them. I mean, there's a few that I love, but I'm not.
Yeah, I think kind of the problem is like for this show. I mean, unless it's like a foreign movie, kind of like this, because I mean, I get it. People know the Samurai, but still, it's a foreign movie, so it's not for everybody. I mean, unless it's like a foreign movie or an old movie, we usually try to like do movies that are less known.
Yeah.
And I feel like all like the war movies I like best are, they're right up there. They're on like the list of best war movies. So it's hard to come up like a war movie that like doesn't get talked about a lot that I feel like is worth us doing. Because I mean, I like Saving Private Ryan, but everyone knows that. And obviously, my favorite war movie is a lot of people's favorite war movie, which is Apocalypse Now. Right behind Apocalypse Now is The Thin Red Line. I adore that, but these are big movies. People are aware of these movies. There's not really much new for us to talk about, or it's not like we're shedding light on them. People going, oh yeah, it never occurred to me to watch that. There are obviously lesser known war movies, but I can't really think of any that I think are that good. I mean, I think one that doesn't get talked about much is the De Palma one, Casualties of War, which I also kind of recently saw a few months ago. But
that one's very heavy-handed with the message and is it Sean Penn's the bad guy?
Yeah, Sean Penn's like nuts in that.
So fucking, so over the top,
I guess, but I mean, it is based on a real life incident, so there's some credibility to it. I mean, maybe they hammed it up a bit, I don't know, but it was an actual rape and murder that did happen. It was real people.
Right. Oh yeah, I know it happened. I
actually like it more than Platoon. Came out shortly after Platoon and it's similar in some ways. Vietnam movie, but
I remember it was a big Fox Penn, like was the big.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a sucker. I'm biased because I really like Michael J. Fox is one of my favorite people, so I like watching him in most things. But
he's a hard guy not to like.
Yeah, I mean, he's Marty McFly. No matter what, he's Marty McFly.
I mean, fucking, whether or not you liked it or not, Family Ties,
Yeah, I used to watch it. I was too young to understand like the thrust of it, right? The whole idea is like he's like a conservative kid that likes Wall Street and suits, and his parents are hippies. I didn't absorb that. I was super young, so that went over my head. Like I did not. I just watched it as like a show with people. Like I was too young to understand that context. But I still liked it. Alex P. Keaton or whatever.
It was just a few years ago that he would have been old enough to actually run. I remember it would. It was a lot of vote for Alex P. Keaton. Like this was like maybe 2016 or something, and maybe before that. I don't know. It was, whatever the age you have to be. Was it 40 or something to run for president?
35.
Oh no, it would have had to been earlier than that.
I think JFK is like the only under 40 president there's been. Yeah, it would have been. Because I mean, Michael J. Fox is like coming up on 60 now. I think. He's appeared on a couple hockey days in Canada, but yeah, I was just trying to think. I mean, we can do this off camera, I guess. I was just thinking about war films. If there's any that would be worth doing for this show, because I mean, there's plenty. There's good war films. I just feel like they're really well known and people know them and they're talked about.
Maybe some non-American ones.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like a different perspective. I mean, there's some good British ones, but again, they're kind of really well known, like. A Bridge Too Far and Bridge on the River Kwai.
I mean, they're pretty one note though. I mean, it really wouldn't be a whole lot to talk about. It'd be like, when the tank crashes through the thing, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are some that are a bit more complicated, but let me think. Oh shit, I just had one. It's a really well-known movie, but at the same time, it's a bit older, so maybe some people wouldn't know it as much. Hold on a second. Oh, it might be the Battle of Algiers, which is a film from the 60s, which is Yeah, see, it's considered one of the best ever. See, even though it has a great reputation, it is older and it is partially foreign, although it is, I think, English language. So that could be a possibility. The Battle of Algiers. I've seen parts of it. I've never seen it the whole way through. It's interesting because it is, I mean, yeah, it's an Italian-Algerian production. So you would get some of the, oh yeah, right. It was kind of known because Ennio Morricone, you know, that did the soundtrack. Morricone. But yeah, that's like always been considered like one of the best war films and just like best films ever. And I've never seen it all the way through. That could be interesting sometime. Because I know that it has a big reputation. It's well known, but it is a bit older. And, you know, I do think there would be a lot of people nowadays that wouldn't have seen it. For instance, I haven't seen it. I've seen parts of it, but I've never actually seen it. So that could be a possibility, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not super long. It's only like 2 hours. Because like some of these others too, like they're epics, right? They're like 3 hours plus. And I'm not against doing a movie like that. It's just it is kind of an investment.
What about like Enemy at the Gates?
I really like that movie. I don't know how much there is to say about it. I mean, it does give us some Russian perspective.
I feel like that's one that you really don't hear mentioned very often now.
I always remember that really well because it was like the first date I went on with my girlfriend. And it was kind of awkward because it has that awkward sex scene in it.
Yeah.
Like having sex with a room full of sleeping soldiers. It was kind of awkward for teenagers on their first date. But it is a good movie. Probably the first movie where I became like aware of Jude Law. Oh yeah, I haven't seen it, but yeah, I know about it. I know all about it without seeing it. I know its reputation. I know the stuff it's got in it.
85? Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. Come and see. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Apparently I have seen it. I've rated it.
That's from the old Soviet system, but I mean, very, really good.
Oh, this is probably one that's on those like most disturbing movie lists.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that goes like really hard into like accurately showing like atrocities committed by the Nazis, like not just talking about it, but like, you know, showing it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess if I could find it. I mean, it's a movie I've always wanted to watch anyway because of its crazy reputation. Because it's one of those movies that besides like being really disturbing, supposedly is like, besides like the shock value, actually is a very good movie with a lot of substance, is what I've heard. Mm-hmm. Is that, you know, it's not just like a shock value movie, that it has a lot of genuine qualities. So yeah, that's on my list of like on my watch list on Letterboxd. Along with a lot of things.
Men of the Sun. It's one something like that. Another one that's like that, but it's maybe Japanese. Men Behind the Sun.
Yeah, I mean, we could maybe do Thin Red Line, because you know we keep saying that we're going to do a Terrence Malick film. I mean, I know we should do at least one Terrence Malick film. That is a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a possibility. That is a long one, though. That is about 3 hours. I'd love to see like the full unedited cut of that movie too. It would be like 5 hours, but then think of all like the prominent actors that were in that movie who had their scenes cut. Like so many.
We were in it and got cut out. That's what I was going to say too.
Yeah. But I love that movie. That's like neck and neck with Apocalypse Now for me for like favorite.
Yeah, I know that's one of Pizza's favorite war movies.
Yeah, I really should own the Criterion of it. The director's cut, I think, is what it is. But anyway, so yeah, war movie is something that we will eventually get around to covering in some capacity on this show. As we said, they're a little more difficult than other movies to talk about the way that we try to. And as we said, a lot of the ones, and I mean, Thin Red Line, I get, is obvious and a lot of people know it, but it is a very deep movie with a lot of philosophical stuff going on. So, I mean, there's certainly a lot to talk about, even if it already has been talked about. But so it's, I mean, I just really like the movie. So obviously it's not like I'd have a bad time talking about it, but certainly a strong possibility. You know, Melville, when he cast Elaine Dillon in this movie, he also cast his wife. And over the course of the movie, they like got divorced. I don't know if it has anything to do with what happened on set or anything, but that is kind of funny. Because that's his actual wife playing his girlfriend in the movie. And then, like, by the time the movie was, like, finished or coming out or whatever, they divorced. Which kind of too bad.
Yeah.
That is, so yeah, Elaine Dillon, that was Natalie Dillon. She passed away back in January.
Oh, wow.
Elaine is still with us. He's older than her. He's 85. But he became a big star, just like the previous guy we talked about in Breathless. This was under the same thing. I think he was already a little, established when this movie came out, I think. But this is the movie that really... Yeah, he'd been in some movies quite a few movies throughout the 60s. Oh, he's in The Leopard. That's an interesting movie. The Leopard is this really really famous period movie. It's an Italian movie, actually. That's also on my list of movies to watch. I didn't know he was in that. That's cool. But it's I think it spans quite a long period of time. It takes place in the 19th century in Italy. It might span a few decades. I'm not sure because I haven't seen it. But that's again, that's like a really big movie with a really great reputation. So, oh, it's funny. I remember talking about Once a Thief. He's in Once a Thief. That's an English language movie. Yeah, he's in a number of English language movies too. So he had sort of the crossover appeal. And of course, The Leopard is Italian. I don't know if he was dubbed or what. But yeah, a lot of movies in several different languages. A very big star. I love that he was in a movie called Icy Breasts. That's a great title.
Not exactly a adjective I'd like to apply to those, but
yeah. But yeah, he had quite a few years where he left France and did a lot of American movies and became a star overseas before coming back. So yeah, he was all over the place. I'm sure I've seen other stuff he's in. I just couldn't. But yeah, I wonder what happened between him and his wife, because it was basically during they were married when they were cast and when shooting started. By the time the movie was over, they divorced, or at least separated. Divorce might not have been final for a year or two, but they've separated. It's too bad. This is a film Roger Ebert liked very much, giving it a 4 out of 4 stars.
yeah, I'd never got into Kevin Smith. I've never understood the appeal.
I'll always have a soft spot for Kevin Smith because of his, background and focus on comic books, I guess. I like that he's a comic book guy. I like that he's written some comics and knows that stuff. And I think he does have a pretty good attitude. I don't think he's phony. I think that's what he's like. I think he is a genuinely pretty humble guy for the most part. I'm not saying he's never done anything shitty. He probably has at some point, but I mean, yeah. No, I actually like his personality a lot. I think I could talk to him quite a lot.
I mean, no
I
offense.
get how you can grow out of it. I mean, a movie like Mallrats and stuff, they're fairly immature, but I'll always love Mallrats.
Mallrats is probably one of my favorites of his. That's such a time capsule movie. I don't know how well it would play now, but
I know Clerks is I love Clerks too, but I actually like Mallrats more.
Clerks was huge, when it came out.
Maybe because some of the comic stuff. Yeah.
I mean, Clerks and Pulp Fiction made Weinstein.
No, I like Kevin Smith. I don't know if I've really I know I've grown out of bands and artists like that. I don't think I've really necessarily grown out of film, maybe individual films, but not directors. I don't think so. Because I mean, trying to think of directors that like did like more immature stuff. Well, I didn't like them to begin with. Like I never liked Michael Bay. Back when I was Michael Bay's target audience, like when I saw Armageddon, like I didn't like dislike it, but I didn't love it either, because Michael Bay said, I make movies for like 14 or 15-year-old boys. Well, that's like basically what I was when I saw like stuff like Armageddon, but I didn't grow out of Michael Bay. I just was never really into him. He's not the worst guy in the world, but I get why, people don't like him.
Yeah, Red State's good too.
Red State's interesting because I think people had really different expectations for it and really kind of surprised by the way it went. I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but it was fun.
Clerks was so huge when it came out. I remember my brother and I rented it, and we were just like, we just didn't get it, Yeah,
I was too young.
Yeah.
When Clerks came out, so it wasn't on my radar. Same thing. I mean, 94 was the same year as Pulp Fiction. See, I was 10 or whatever. So, like, people say 94, like, we hear somebody like our friend Cameron, like, he remembers that really well because of his age. I don't. I know that, Forrest Gump came out in 94. Like, I mean, I know they all came out, but I mean, that's what I was aware of. That's what I actually saw. I didn't see Pulp Fiction until, like, I was in high school. And when I saw Mallrats for the first time, I didn't know Clerks existed. So.
Yeah. I was aware of Pulp Fiction. I had friends that were huge fans of it at the time. I remember it got re-released, I think, after it won some awards at the Oscars or whatever.
Yeah.
And I still never saw it. Unfortunately, at the theater, I did buy it when it came out on VHS.
I mean, I can remember being a kid and seeing TV shows and stuff that made like Pulp Fiction references. And I knew it was a reference to something, but I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until like seeing it, was like, oh, that's what they were referencing. Because again, it was so big. And I remember on your channel a few years ago, you made a little series about movies that are kind of like Pulp Fiction ripoffs. So as you said, like it became kind of a whole little subgenre. It's like, oh, let's do sort of like self-referential, stylistic, crime type of thing. Came a whole thing in the mid to late 90s. But at the time, no, I was more or less oblivious. I wasn't like big into movies. I watched movies. So I was just an ordinary kid. I did not really know much about movies. And, I would have been too young for Pulp Fiction. I was like 11 years old.
That was, I bid hard on that. And all the ripoffs too. I saw, The Usual Suspects. So many of them.
I think that's one of the most overrated movies of all time. Yeah, I think it's an enjoyable ride, but I'll say one thing and then we'll let it go and move on to other things. But I'll say everybody talks about The Usual Suspects because of its twist. To me, the fact that a guy lied isn't a twist. How's that a twist? Oh, he lied. He was lying. What a brilliant twist. Like, what? That's not a twist. He was lying.
He did it on things in the room.
Yeah, and it's like he's not even a good liar. He was just taking stuff that he saw. Yeah.
I think you and Jacob are on the same wavelength, man. He hates American Beauty too.
Yeah, I despise American Beauty. I kind of got famous for that in the early days of Sausage Factory. It was like I made up a whole show about stuff we hated because I wanted to dunk on that. I don't dislike Forrest Gump. It's overly sentimental and overly goofy and stuff, but I mean I can enjoy it.
It's for a one watch type thing. I mean, it's like a movie you can watch with your mom or some shit, You're not going to, it's something that everyone can kind of appreciate. It's kind of like a, little, path down some American history,
Yeah.
You got this, I don't know.
I mean, I kind of get why it sticks in the memory. He's like sort of a memorable character with like these silly quotes and stuff. I mean, and that's fine if people like it. No, I don't dislike it. I just, it's just a movie I'm fine with. It happened. I can watch it and enjoy it. It comes on TV and I'll watch parts of it and stuff. But no, I'm not really a fan. I mean, a lot of people I think just resent that movie because it had the reputation. Well, it overshadowed movies like Pulp Fiction and like Shawshank Redemption that both came out like the same year. Because people were like,
Yeah.
So I get that. But yeah, I hate American Beauty. You always wanted me to do it on the show, and I just don't have the strength, man. I despise it that much.
We could talk about how beautiful garbage bags are in the wind.
Yeah. He's the worst part, by the way. Like I don't like any of the movie, but that kid is the worst part for me of all the badness. I think it's all bad, but I think he's the worst. That kid with the camera and stuff. Go fuck himself. But anyway, we don't have to drag this one out. It's a pretty, and I don't want to talk too much. We got to talk about trains and war movies a little bit, but we can come back around and finish off. This doesn't have to be a particularly long episode. But yeah, The Samurai is a movie that is probably more remembered for its influence than its actual substance, but I think it has really good substance too. I get if some people get a little impatient with some of the pacing, I understand that. And I wouldn't be against maybe some of the scenes being trimmed. They could be, but none of it bothers me because I think, again, it's sort of building atmosphere and tension.
Yeah, I agree. I've got a very little problem with the pacing, but I know it's intentional.
Mm-hmm. And that's really my only problem with the movie. I think he's perfectly cast. He's so great. He just sort of defines that look of sort of like that of coolness and professionalism and detachment that you would see again and again in assassins in movies later on. I'm trying to think what else. Good casting. The music is fairly simplistic, but fits so perfectly. I think when he set out to make a black and white movie in color, he succeeded tremendously. This might be the best example of a movie that is in color, but reminds me so much of black and white. It has like that great washed out look, a lot of grays and blues, as we said. That looks really great. And as you said, it's like established right off the first establishing shot when they're, oh, we absolutely are, Christian. Yeah. We don't social distance on this show. On alternating weeks, I fly to Mississippi or he flies up here. It's the only way we can do the show. We don't like
very dedicated.
Exactly. Here, reach across.
Oh, you're right here. Here you go. Oh wait, other one.
Yeah. Apparently, my bedroom has similar decor to your office. Yeah. Your office needs a few more posters, but apart from that, right on there. Jacob. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It's been years since I watched the movie because I hate it. It's not something I re-subject myself to. But yeah, everything feels really phony and fake to me. Everything feels like a line. Everything feels like a put on. That works in some movies because some movies they're not really going for reality. It's more of like a magic realism, heightened reality thing, and I can accept it. It's just I find everybody so contemptible and annoying.
I just like how I don't know. I think Kevin Spacey's really funny in it. I just like his whole arc. Like if him, just fed up and he like works at McDonald's and smokes weed and is working out, and
none of that bothers me. Like that, none of that is my critique of the movie. I don't care about that.
That's what I think about it.
And I'm not one of those people that talks about like immorality in the movie either. I don't care about that either. I mean, it's a movie. Movie's gonna have immoral stuff in it. I don't give a shit. So I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, he's fixated on a high school girl. Like, fuck, I don't care. And that is real life. You think middle-aged men don't fixate on high school girls? Like, you're crazy. They do, and way more than you think. But anyway, so none of that is my issue with the movie. We've had this conversation a lot, and it's not just about that. It's just like the fine line between whether or not you find a movie pretentious or not. Because there's a lot of movies I like that I know other people find pretentious. And I have my argument for why they're not pretentious. But at the same time, it's subjective. And if they think it's pretentious, they're not wrong. It's more like maybe it's a pretentiousness I can handle, or I just don't see it that way. So I don't just attack movies for being pretentious because there's some movies I like. I'm fully aware that to most people they're pretentious. I'm just saying, for me, I can't get over how pretentious American Beauty feels to me. Everything about it feels forced. Everything feels like they're trying to like make some sort of like grand point about everything. And I realize you could throw the same argument against certain other movies that I like. But it just doesn't work for me. But
I like how the next door neighbor is I can't think of the word. He hates gay people so much, but he's gay himself.
Yeah, he turns out to be a closeted.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Homophobic?
Homophobic, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so there's parts I've kind of burned out of my memory. But I mean, I guess I remember all the key stuff. Actually, I forgot that he started working at McDonald's. I knew that like he left his job and started smoking pot, and the kid sold it to him.
Yeah.
Portrait of a Lady on Fire. did I see that?
It's one of Hayden's favorites.
Sounds like I've seen it. I better take a quick look.
Oh, yeah, I don't disagree with you, Jacob. I just think it's funny. I just like the Kevin Spacey character in that movie. I don't think it's a masterpiece by any means, but...
Oh, it came out in 2019, so no, I definitely didn't see it. That's much newer than I thought. I must have been thinking about something else, because that's 2019. That's pretty new. Did pretty well at the Cannes Festival, though, so it sounds like something to watch for. Oh, is this about the woman and she falls in love with the person she's painting? Is that what it is? Isn't it that she's like a portrait artist and she starts falling in love with something? I think I know what it is now. It's newer. It's newer than I thought. So yeah, it sounds like something I'd watch at some point. But no, I have not at this date seen it. But yeah, it sounds pretty cool. I dig things like that. Don't assassinate Kevin Spacey's great character. I mean, I really like Kevin Spacey as an actor for sure. You know, we were talking about LA Confidential not too long ago. He's really good in that. I mean, he's really good in most of the stuff he does.
I mean, did we get confirmation that the allegations were true? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like it must be just because of the way he totally retreated from society. Like, some people like stood up and fought more and made denials. Like, he did not. He was just like, okay, I'll go away.
I don't know if he had a choice.
I guess. It was really weird that he like chose to like when allegations came up, he addressed them. He also chose to like come out as gay at that moment. A lot of people thought he kind of did that for sympathy. It's like, you know, you had many years to come out as gay, but now you're doing it like in the midst of these allegations. Like, yeah, that's kind of. Yeah. But I mean, I know that at least he could, like, aside from being anything criminal, I know that he could be a real jerk. That's for sure. Like, that is confirmed, like him being a real jerk, which is probably why he's really good at playing one. Like, what's the movie? The United States of Leland is an interesting movie. And he's the father. He's like the estranged father of the kid. And he's like this somewhat well-known author. And he's such a pompous asshole. And it's so well done. It's just like, it's like Kevin Spacey was like born for that. Did you see We Need to Talk About Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the United States of Leland's kind of like the same kind of deal.
Oh, really?
You'd like it. Because although this one's the aftermath. In this one, it's the aftermath of like this kid doing this horrific act of violence, and it's kind of like trying, you know, putting the pieces together and figuring out like why it happened and stuff. Jenna Malone's in it. Because Jenna Malone is, you know, in her 30s or whatever now, but I can only accept Jenna Malone playing a teenager. Like, that's what she's supposed to do.
Oh, she was in the Mandy Moore movie, the school movie.
Saved.
Yeah.
I love Saved. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. Of course, I love Mandy Moore. Mandy Moore is a goddess or angel that is.
It's got a hell of a cast in that United States of Leland.
I can't really remember. I know Jenna Malone's in it, and I know Kevin Spacey's in it. I don't even remember who plays the main kid.
Ryan Gosling.
And I don't remember anybody else. Wow. Yeah.
Olin.
Was Ryan Gosling the main guy?
I think so. Leland. Yeah. Leland P. Fitzgerald.
I don't even remember that. That's how. I mean, it was before he was a star. He was pretty young. But anyway, I haven't seen it in a long time, but it's a good movie. I should watch it again if I can find it. But you dig it. I know you'd like it. It's a good movie. But it has a lot in common with something like We Need to Talk About Kevin. Except when Kevin, it's the lead up to him doing something awful. In this, it's the aftermath, which I think actually makes it more interesting.
Man, it doesn't look like him at all. He's got long, like bushy brown hair.
Yeah.
Wow. He's still got his pouty eyes though.
Mm-hmm. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I saw stuff Ryan Gosling was in, but I didn't make the connection until I was much older because he was on like Goosebumps.
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Because they were Canadian productions.
He was
he in Murder by Numbers?
Yep.
Yeah. That was when he was sort of starting to.
That was one of the
kind of something.
Things, yeah.
But I mean, really tying back to this, like Drive was like the big movie, right? That's what made him a star, I think. He'd had main roles before Drive, but he wasn't. I think like the Drive put him on the A list, I think. without Drive, he wouldn't have been in stuff like the Blade Runner sequel or La La Land, stuff like that. I don't think he would have had any shot at those roles if not for Drive.
Yeah, he had a lot of big hits there around that time.
I don't remember actually the body count in Talk About Kevin. I can't remember if it was like a lot of kids or what, but I don't know. Weren't they in like a gym? Maybe they didn't have anywhere to go. I can't remember. I didn't know it was that many kids. I thought it was maybe 3 or 4. It's been a while since I've seen it. But anyway, I like it, but I think if not that there's any reason necessary, but I think United States of Leland is better. Maybe because he's a little more sympathetic too. Like in United States of Leland, the conclusion you draw isn't necessarily like this kid is like some kind of psychopath. Whereas it's pretty apparent that's exactly what like Kevin is. It's a weird movie because like isn't John C. Reilly his dad?
Yeah. And Tilda Swinton, I think, is his mom.
John C. Reilly's one of those actors. He's been around for forever, but for most people or somebody like me, he didn't make an impression until he started doing like big comedic roles. So going back and seeing him in like serious roles, like kind of freaks me out. It's like weird. I'm like, this is too serious. Where's the jokes? There's no jokes in when you talk about Kevin. He plays kind of a similar role, isn't he, in that movie Carnage? Which again is kind of a similar thing where he's the father of a kid that did something.
Oh yeah. Elephant. We've actually covered him in the show before, Jake.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, we're both big fans of Elephant and Gus Van Sant in general. I think we've done like 3 of his movies.
At least 3, yeah.
Yeah. So
that's my fault.
Anyway, let's finish off here. So yeah, La Samurai is totally one of those movies I think it really holds up. It's got such a great look and style, and you can't overstate its crazy influence on neo-noir and assassin movies. Almost everything that came afterward owes at least a bit of a debt to it stylistically, or even just some of the elements of the plot. Like the archetype of this passionless assassin who just lives by a code and is very Spartan and stuff. Sometimes they stretch it further and make them more evil, like the guy in Country for Old Men, or sometimes they make it even so they got like some nobility to them. This movie, they hint at some nobility in this guy, but they don't go the whole way, and that's kind of the things I like about it. Is, as we said, like it's hard to tell what's out of character or in character for this guy because they give you so little. It's just he's almost like a blank slate, which I think is kind of cool. And for a movie that doesn't have like a lot of action or anything like that, it's really good at sort of like building tension, I think. The opening killing is something we're so used to seeing now, it's kind of easy to take for granted, but I just really like the stylistically, how do they do that again? How the camera goes to the guy getting his gun, and then when the gunshot goes, it comes back. He's just got the gun in his hand, almost like it appeared there. This idea that he's just that fast, which is really cool, which I'm sure other movies have used, but done really well here. But yeah, I would like to see some more of the films that Melville did. I saw Les Enfants Terribles many years ago. I'd like to see it again because it's definitely a very sort of sinister movie. It was the type of movie that like probably couldn't have been made in the U.S. at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's like 1960 or something like that. Before things started to change, as we've talked about many times when we talked about the French New Wave and the New Hollywood movement and how they'd finally, break through and start showing more, controversial content on the screen after a couple decades of being smothered by the Hays Code and having to conform to all these rules and stuff. But La Samurai is interesting because, well, it does have some of the style of the French New Wave stuff. It has a lot more in common with the New Hollywood stuff in that it is very American, I think, in its style and presentation, which is no surprise when you do some reading about Melville and find out, like, as he was growing up, he had like a big fascination with American culture, literature, and movies. So obviously he's going to put it into his work, and it shows up really well. And it's got such a sort of simple but arresting plot. You can understand why it's so easy to like sort of adapt it into a completely different movies. Like The Driver is similar, but it still stands on its own as its own movie. Drive is very similar, but it still stands on its own movie because it's just sort of taking the bones and working around them. Right. Anyway, for those that join us later, we are going to follow this up with The Driver next week. so we can do some compare and contrast. And although I'm sure we mentioned both these movies back when we did a couple years ago, but a couple years ago we did do Drive. So if anybody's interested, you can find that on the channel from a couple years back. Drive from 2011. Nicholas Winding Refn, who's one of the more stylish filmmakers of the day, who definitely was into all this stuff. But yeah, I think that's all right. I think that wraps up nicely. But yeah, this just plays into my wheelhouse. I love movies like this. I like crime thrillers. I like movies about assassins. A lot of that stuff is really cool to me, and a lot of it comes down to their style. And this movie's almost like the template for that. Although again, it's all works and things. This takes from noir films that came beforehand. So
right.
Anyway, I guess that'll finish it up. So that's the Samurai, 1967. And yeah, next week we'll be coming back with Walter Hill's The Driver, which is heavily influenced with this movie to the point where it almost feels like a reimagining or loose remake or something like that. And I think it'll be the first Walter Hill movie we get to talk about, which is cool because I'm a big fan of him. And actually, last week's show, I blabbed a little about my appreciation for him. I think he's always been kind of an under the radar type guy who's did a lot of good stuff directing. Of course, he's had an impact besides being a director. You know, he was one of the producers on Alien, for instance, and he's always been around some of the bigger, cooler franchises. Along with is it Deborah Hill, his wife, or at least it was his wife at the time, Deborah Hill. Something like that.
Was it John Carpenter married to someone named Deborah Hill?
Yes. Okay, yeah. Maybe, yeah, that might be it. I think that's what it is. I was taking her name and conflating it. So yeah, Deborah Hill was the one that produced stuff with Carpenter because they had a relationship. So, but yeah, okay, yeah, that's my mistake. Thanks for catching that. That was just me mixing some names up there because I just thought, oh, her last name is Hill. So yeah. Good catch there. So yeah, you're right. Deborah Hill was the collaborator with, of course, the great John Carpenter. Although she was a producer on some interesting unrelated stuff like Adventures in Babysitting, really? and the Fisher King. Oh. So she did all her early credits had stuff to do with Clue too, with Carpenter. But then later on, she was a producer just for other stuff, but not anything that Walter Hill did. So yeah, that was my mistake. I was just taking the name. Yeah, for sure. I even like stuff after that, although maybe not as much. But yeah, big Walter Hill fan. So I'm really enthused to talk about one of my favorite movies by him. Which might even be my favorite movie by him. I really like which came out the year after The Warriors. I really like The Warriors too. They're kind of neck and neck. I really love both those movies. So it'll be really fun to talk about that next week. So anyway, yeah, look forward to that. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you all again next time really soon. Hopefully, finally, after having a pretty bad run of bad luck to start off this year, we're hoping to get 2021 going here and get some more consistency and get some more episodes because we have all sorts of plans going forward. Including we're pretty close, maybe a month or two away from doing another series. We haven't done a series in a long time, so we'll let you guys know the details on that as we figure them out. So thanks a lot, guys. See ya.
Very cool. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.